In the absence of the member to present the bill, we will move to the next business. And we now come to the backbench debate. We come to the backbench debate on new towns, and I call Katrina Murray, who will speak for around 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this House has considered new towns, and I am grateful to the Backbench Business Committee for finding time for this important debate. As we reach the 80th anniversary of the New Towns Act 1946, it feels like exactly the right moment for the House to pause and reflect on what was, at the time, a bold and radical idea. One that sought not just to build houses, but to shape communities. 8 decades on, as we again face the challenge of large-scale house building and the prospect of a new generation of new towns, it is right that we reflect honestly on both the shortcomings and the successes of that legacy. This debate has a personal resonance for me. I was brought up in Markinch, on the edge of the new town of Glenrothes. I went to school there, and like many people growing up in and around a new town, it simply felt like home, a place shaped by decisions taken long before I was born, but which defined everyday life. And it feels like a fitting symmetry that years after leaving school in 1989 and embarking on my own career journey, I now have the privilege of representing another new town in this House. Cumbernauld has just marked its 70th anniversary, and its story of ambition, achievement, challenge and renewal mirrors the experience of so many new towns across the country, which is why I am so pleased that colleagues from across the House are taking part today. This debate gives us the opportunity to reflect not only on what new towns have delivered, but what they can still teach us. To understand new towns, we have to remember why they were created in the first place. Post-war Britain faced severe housing shortages, overcrowding and poor living conditions. And there was a clear recognition that simply expanding existing towns and cities would not be enough. For many families, that wasn't abstract policy, it was daily life. One local resident, someone who's now a close friend, described moving from a top-floor slum with damp walls, no hot water, and a shared toilet on a stair landing, to a 3-bedroomed home with a bathroom, her own bedroom, a garden and space to live. That move was life-changing. The New Towns programme was a deliberate choice to do things differently. It wasn't just about building houses quickly, it was about planning whole communities, with homes alongside jobs, schools, services and green space so people could build decent lives. And for those of us who grew up in or around new towns, there were some very familiar signs. You know you live in a new town when your second driving lesson is entirely about roundabouts. Not because your instructor has it in for you, but because there's so many of them. You know, and let's be honest, the only new traffic lights in a new town are generally on a roundabout. You also know that you live in a new town when housing numbers make no sense to anybody arriving by car. Where number 1 is across from number 25 and the street and across from can be seen from number 43 and the street itself on neighbouring street starts at number 420. Looks a bit like next week's lottery numbers, but what residents know and delivery drivers very quickly discover, it's designed to make sense on foot. It works by neighbourhood, by paths, by walkways. Might confuse the sat-nav, but it's been a postal worker's friend for decades. But behind those quirks was a serious purpose. Cumbernauld, designated in 1955, was built to meet urgent housing needs and to offer better living conditions, access to work and a strong sense of community. It was part of a wider post-war belief that planning, done properly, could improve people's lives And for some families, it changed the course of those lives entirely. Another resident told me that they don't believe that they would ever have gone to university if they hadn't escaped Glasgow and attended a Cumbernauld school that treated children with dignity and ambition. I will happily give way.
I'm grateful and just making an excellent speech about the importance of new towns. I was brought up just outside Kilwinning, which is part of the urban new town in Ayrshire, and she and I are probably of a similar age. And does she remember the campaign, the iconic campaign in the 1980s, which was, what's it called? Cumbernauld. And I just wondered how successful that campaign was in her view in terms of bringing people to the town and bringing new employers to the area.
And I do thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. The fact that you couldn't go anywhere in the 80s without actually seeing that statement means that the knowledge of Cumbernauld happens across the country. I remember my first trips to London seeing that hoarding on the tube. But other new towns, of course, tried to get in on the act. Living in Livingston didn't quite hit as well as it did, but that was the beauty of part of a development corporation that actually shone part of that design more widely. I'm very aware of the timing on this, but on you go.
Madam Deputy Chair, thank you, and thank you to the Honourable Lady for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch. I hope I've got that correct. Apologies if my Ulster accent has destroyed that word. But the last new town we had in Northern Ireland was Craigavon back in 1965. That was some 60 years ago. I was 10-year-old starting secondary school. But does the Honourable Lady agree with the growing populations that we have across the United Kingdom that new towns should be established in areas that have the space? And does the Honourable Lady also agree that a working group must look UK-wide at this issue to provide people with communities and not just simply houses? It's not just about a house, it's about a community.
I think the honourable gentleman is getting on to, because I've read the other parts of my speech as we're coming on. As I was about to say, new towns were never meant to just be housing schemes. They were meant to be places, planned communities, where homes, jobs, services developed together so people could build stable lives close to where they work. That vision is clear in how Cumbernauld was developed. Brought together families moving out of overcrowded parts of Glasgow alongside others, often younger people and professionals who moved there specifically to work. Employment was central, not an afterthought. Major employers, including boroughs, played a central role in the town's early growth, provided skilled employment at scale, initially manufacturing mechanical adding machines, remember those, and later moving into computers and printers. People moved to Cumbernauld for work, opportunity and to put down roots. And as industries changed, the site evolved into what is now the Ward Park Industrial Area, continuing to support employment in different forms. And around that, neighbourhoods were designed to function as real communities. Social housing was central, not marginal. Each area had its own shops, post office, parking, garages, public transport with regular bus services connecting people into Glasgow and beyond. When we discuss new towns now, the focus is often on buildings or concrete. But what often gets overlooked is the thought given to how people would actually live. How housing, employment, transport and green space all fits together. Now, Cumbernauld is sometimes judged by its built form, but it's also defined by its green space, deliberately woven into daily life. That's a new town model at its best. It's impossible to talk about Cumbernauld without mentioning the town centre. In the 1960s, it was genuinely celebrated, award-winning, internationally recognised and seen as a confident expression of modernist and brutalist design. Officially opened by Princess Margaret and Lord Snowdon. For families arriving at that time, that optimism was real. Modern buildings, light, space and public services that felt like it was stepping out of the 19th century conditions they were used to and into the modern world. Decades later, that very same town centre went on to win awards of a very different kind, including the Carbuncle Awards and the Pluke on the Plinth in the early noughties. That contrast tells its own story. It's not about a lack of ambition, but it's about what happens when bold design is left without sustained investment, renewal and long-term stewardship. Today, the town centre is undergoing long-term regeneration, made possible with the investment of the UK Government, focused on making the centre work for modern life, rather than erasing what came before. The same issues can be seen in part of the housing stock. Houses that were built quickly using methods that were innovative at the time did not always stand the test of time. In Cumbernauld, areas such as Ainsley Road were affected by concrete deterioration, leading to homes having to be demolished, while flat-roofed housing, very much of its era, proved less suited to Scotland's climate as buildings aged. But that experience has also supported local expertise, including firms like Briggs & Masco, a Cumbernauld-based flat roofing specialist, investing highly in skills and apprenticeships. Challenges not unique to my town. Across the new towns, infrastructure and housing aged at the same time, without the funding or the governance structures to renew them properly. When the development corporations were wound up and assets sold off, responsibility became fragmented. In many cases, ownership passed from hedge fund to hedge fund, with no real long-term stake in the place beyond what appeared on a balance sheet. What went wrong was not the new town concept itself, but the failure to plan properly for what came next. That is a lesson we cannot afford to ignore. If we are serious about learning from new towns and building new ones, the ambition at the start has to be matched with responsibility over the long term. When we talk about new towns, it's easy to focus on plans and buildings. What really made places like Cumbernauld work were the people who stepped up, saw what was missing and got things done. That early generation who made sure that this was their community. One of those people was Sheena Walker, a true pioneer in disability care. When she moved to Cumbernauld in the late 1960s, there was no local support for children with learning disabilities. She refused to accept that. Through sheer determination and tenacity, she brought parents together, worked across the Development Corporation, the Council and social work to create community housing, day centres and respite care. Her drive was the difference, and the services she helped to build became so strong that families later moved to Cumbernauld specifically because of them.
Will the Honourable Lady give way on that point?
I'll have to give way.
My honourable friend is making an excellent speech. As co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Housing and Care for Older People, we're about to complete an inquiry into intergenerational communities. So will she join me in calling that the new towns are built and designed for all ages and all abilities as inclusive communities?
Yeah. I very much commend my honourable friend's suggestion there. What has been quite clear is exactly how important it is to have intergenerational towns and accessible housing built at the same point. Another local legend was Danny McGowan, who taught generations of Cumbernaulds children to swim. He founded Cumbernauld Swimming Club and built it into a competitive force, driven by his passion for the sport and for giving young people confidence in the water, all despite the very small challenge that the council had built the swimming pool the wrong size for it to be a competitive pool. Rather than be put off, he worked around it, and thousands, probably hundreds of thousands, of children have benefited as a result. Both of these stories matter because it shows that new towns were never just about infrastructure. They were about people with commitment, imagination, shaping communities from the inside, making places work for those who lived there. So what does this tell us? Not just about Cumbernauld, but about new towns more broadly. One clear lesson is that long-term responsibility matters. Building homes and infrastructure is only the beginning. Without clarity about stewardship, places struggle to thrive decades later. Another lesson is that homes and jobs must be planned together. New towns worked best when people could live close by to where they worked, and when towns weren't just allowed to become purely commuter settlements. And renewal has to start with people. Regeneration is not just about buildings and master plans. It has to involve communities and respect the identity of places people care deeply about. This feels particularly relevant as the government looks to build a new generation of new towns in England. If we're serious about doing this well, we have to learn from the first generation, planning for stewardship from day one and giving communities a real voice as places grow and change. Our first generation of new towns are no longer new towns in any meaningful sense. They are simply towns with families, histories, challenges and pride built up over generations. People were born there, raised there, worked there, stayed there, left there, came home. That's what matters when we talk about the future. I hope this debate helps ensure that as we build again at scale, we don't just create new places, but we commit to them for the long term. And I look forward to hearing the contributions from across the House.
The question is as on the order paper. I call Richard Fuller.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would like to make clear that I am speaking in an individual capacity as a constituency MP, the Member of Parliament for North Bedfordshire, and start by congratulating the Honourable Lady, the Member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, for her speech and for the extraordinarily human way that she described her life in a new town. For people in North Bedfordshire, that may be a timely testimony, because I'd like to draw the focus to proposals for new towns that are in this government's recommendation of the New Towns Task Force. Thamesmead in North Bedfordshire is a historic village, a village that is the site, or was the site, of a decisive battle in 917 AD when King Edward the Elder's forces stormed a Danish stronghold, killing the Danish king and effectively breaking Danish power in the region. A village that includes the former RAF Thamesmead airfield, from which multiple special operations were flown to send people to help resistance movements in Nazi-occupied countries. A village of 234 households, comprising fewer than 500 people, and a village that has been in two parts since the duelling of the A1 in 1962. And a village that the New Towns Commission report stated is, quote, a unique opportunity with potential to provide over 40,000 homes in a standalone greenfield settlement. Thamesmead is the largest of the proposed new towns and will take this village of 500 people potentially into a new town of at least 40,000 homes, so that's 100,000 plus people. And so I thought I'd take a few minutes in this individual capacity to raise some points that have been raised by my constituents in recent meetings with residents, with the parish council, and with their local councillor, Adam Zerny. One of the questions, of course, is why Thamesmead? It's not what we want, we don't want this change, etc. And that is an important issue for consideration, and we'll await the final decision of the government. But if that decision is made, the number one source of scepticism is that much of Thamesmead is a floodplain. And there is a legitimate question about how the flood risk will be managed in any new town. It's a floodplain both for the River Ouse and the River Ivor. Sticking on the themes of music, local residents have for years dealt with a range of sewage overflow issues. And I myself have been witness to a number of these and held residence with that. And it's important in that that the water company, which wishes to obviously improve these, if we have a new town, that adequate funding is available both to provide the wastewater and sewage water infrastructure that was required, but also to solve the existing problems. And as the Minister will be aware, the pressure on water resources in Bedfordshire is extensive. We are also the site of Universal Studios, which is a theme park that will attract up to 8 to 10 million people a year. That's the equivalent of an additional population of 50,000 in terms of water usage. And so with that being developed over the next 5 years, and the new town, the one source of water that runs between it is the River Ouse, and we just need to make sure there is a plan for the River Ouse. There is a group set up by Bedford Borough Council called the North Bedfordshire Water Management Group, run by Paul Leinster, formerly of the Environment Agency, and I would encourage the Minister to meet with him to discuss those issues, both about Universal and about Thamesmead. The Minister should be recognised also that the proposal at Newtown fit into a context of very rapid housing growth. So honourable members should be aware that the pace of housing growth in terms of households in Bedfordshire has been growing at 2.5 times the national average already for the last decade or more. And so we already have this build-up over 15, 20 years of additional pressures on local services. And at the meeting that we held last week with the Parish Council, with residents, the number one issue other than the floodplain was local services provisions. People already don't have access sufficiently to GP services, they don't have access to transport services, and just a few miles away is the village of Northstowe, which is sort of the poster child for getting it wrong in terms of local services. All the things that the Honourable Lady from Cumbernauld was saying were already there. They're not, they weren't there in Northstowe. No shops, no GPs for a number of years while residents were moving in. Obviously local residents don't want to see that happen in any change if Thamesmead Newtown comes forward. Power supply, it's a village that still runs on oil heating. There is no other power supply, and a number of residents are keen to understand whether in the Newtown solar and as ground source heat pumps would be a prerequisite for the new housing or not. A key point, of course, if you're a village with a proposal for a new town of up to 100,000 people, is village identity, village heritage, and in particular around RAF Thamesmead, with a lot of concerns about the existing build, one of the most important existing buildings there of Gibraltar Barn, and making sure that any plans take account of that, and nature and wildlife. My residents are connected. They chose to live in a rural area. They are proud of their rural environment. The RSPB, the head office is literally just 5 miles away from Thamesmead, so it's crucially important that we do whatever we can if we move ahead, or the government moves ahead, to maintain the nature and wildlife of the area. Adequacy of road networks, and also questions about the type of employment. Briefly, if I can cover a couple more areas, Madam Deputy Speaker. Professor Doug Cleland and Dr. Nigel Moore, who are two independent experts in the area of planning, have completed research on Thamesmead in the last 2 years and provided evidence to the House of Lords Built Environment Committee report, New Towns Laying the Foundations. And this goes to both the footprint, the scale and the timeline. In the evidence provided by Professor Cleland and Dr. Moore, they present a compact centre of 25,000 homes over 4.5 square miles, and that footprint connects St Neots to Sandy in an area between the A1 and the Great Northern Rail Line. That's a very extensive area. But then there is a wider footprint which is for the building of an additional, could accommodate building of an additional 15,000 homes in satellite developments that would stretch south from Thamesmead to the village of Blunham, onto Great Barford, to Wilden, to Little Staunton, then across to Hale Weston, and including the villages of Staplow and Honeydon and Roxton and Potton and Everton, and others, with a similar impact on the Cambridgeshire side of Thamesmead. Now, I don't expect all members to know all those villages, beautiful though they are, and well worth visiting, as they should. But what I wanted to just say is just to make sure that local residents are aware of the scale of what might be occurring if this goes ahead in North Bedfordshire and in parts of Cambridgeshire. And I'm not sure local residents have internalised that, and there's a lot of work the government would have to do if they decide to move forward, and in particular to be clear about the use of farmland, because this is a primary agricultural area. So there are some questions for me to leave with the Minister, if I may. The first is, The government has a housing target of 1.5 million. Personally, I'm not sure it's got off to a particularly good start on that. And that may have an impact on the type of housing being built. I'd be interested in the Minister could just, any references you can about Thamesmead about that. Number two, I've mentioned that the housing growth in North Bedfordshire is 2.5 times the national average. It's the government's position that new towns should not count in that total. But come on, really? I mean, we're already struggling to keep up. There is no way that you can then plop on this additional amount of housing on top of that pace of growth and not expect things to break. Number three, the government's social housing target, specifically the social housing target, will that apply or not in the context of these very large new towns? Number four, in the decision about new towns, can I just alert the Minister that this is just potentially one of 6 nationally significant infrastructure projects in Bedfordshire, of which 2 are directly in this footprint, one of which is Black Cat Roundabout, which is underway and will be completed, and that's fine. But there is also a proposal for a large-scale solar farm over 1,900 acres. That's the size of Gatwick Airport and a bit more. And that's within that boundary that was defined as the satellite boundary. So what on earth is going to happen with that? Clearly, to me, it's a choice. You can do one or the other. You can't possibly do both. And the local residents are really keen to make sure, Minister, that their local voice is heard. And I must say, I had a meeting with the Civil Service, Madam Deputy Speaker, who's dealing with this, and she was 100% on board with that. I prepared some documents for that, and I'm sure the Minister will too. I can see he's nodding from his position. And I think my residents will be very, very clear about that. And once a decision is made, if Thamesmead is one of those, I would strongly encourage the ministerial team to come up to Thamesmead, to listen to those villagers, have a conversation with them, because so much can be done. As the Honourable Lady said in her speech, in the end, this is about people. And if the government takes people along with them at the start, if it makes that decision, it will set itself up in a much better way forward. So thank you very much, Madam Deputy, for the chance to speak.
Abena Oppong-Asare.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to begin by thanking my honourable friend for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch for securing such an important debate on new towns. As my honourable friend said, her constituency is one of Britain's great post-war new towns. So I think it's very clear that she knows a lot in this area, and it's evidence from her speech that there are a lot of opportunities and responsibilities to come with shaping places for the long term, not just building homes, but also building communities. I also want to congratulate Cumbernauld on its recent 70th anniversary and pay tribute to the generations who's made it with place, identity, pride and resilience. I also want to, it's an honour to always follow the Honourable Member for North Bedfordshire and to hear about the proposals for Newtown, Thamesmead. And I also agree with him that it's important in bringing those communities that are likely to receive a new town along on the journey so they don't feel divided as part of the process. And it's something that I'll be speaking to as well. I wanted to speak today because my constituency of Erith and Thamesmead now faces a similar moment of opportunity, one that will shape the lives in my constituency for decades to come. So I was particularly delighted when last September Thamesmead Waterfront was shortlisted as one of the New Towns Task Force as one of the 12 locations nationally for the next generation of new towns. I know both the Shadow Minister and the Minister know the area quite well, and I'm sure they'll agree that it's an opportunity in this to have this new town. I welcome this huge opportunity to tackle London's housing crisis, boost economic growth and unlock long overdue investment in transport and infrastructure for my constituents. Thamesmead Waterfront is a 100-hectare site that offers capacity for up to 15,000 new homes, alongside thousands of new jobs, expanded new town centre and high-quality green spaces. It is one of the most deliverable large-scale opportunities in the country. We'll see this happen with a joint venture alongside Peabody and Lendlease. That's already in place, with a vision for an area which I see backed by the government, and also my council, Greenwich Council, which is led by Councillor Anthony Okorea, and the London Authority and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. It is central to Thamesmead's waterfront success in the extension of the Docklands Light Rail, also known as the DLR, which is something that I've campaigned on since I was first elected in this House in 2019. The proposed DLR extension is critical to unlocking these thousands of homes and jobs, with Transport for London estimating an economic boost of around 18 billion. It will finally connect SE28, which is the only postcode in London without a rail or tube station, to the wider city. That is a question of fairness as much as growth, and I hope once it's done, Madam Deputy Speaker will come on the DLR to visit my constituency. I know that local residents want this as well, and I understand that about 85% of respondents to the TfL poll supported the DLR extension, so it's widely welcomed. So this is exactly the kind of infrastructure-led development that the New Towns programme should champion, building homes in the right places, in the right order, with transport planned from the start. So alongside my honourable friend for West Ham and Beckton, I was delighted to hear the Chancellor's commitment in her budget last November to work with TfL and the GLA to support the DLR extension to our constituencies. But if we are serious about... Happy to give way?
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and she is correct. I am very familiar with the site in her constituency that is proposed to be one of the new towns. I also acknowledge and accept and support her argument that the infrastructure, the DLR in this case, would stimulate the regeneration of Thamesmead. Is it a cause for regret, therefore, that the site in her constituency is not included in the 3 new towns that are scheduled to begin work before 2029?
I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the Shadow Minister, and I also want to say thank you for supporting the work that I'm doing, particularly in Thamesmead, and recognising this. I feel very optimistic about what the government is doing in terms of proposing the Thamesmead as one of the new towns. This is the reason why we're working in a collaboration with the government on this, and part of the reason that we are having this debate today and why the government has prioritised this is they recognise this alongside the announcement that the Chancellor made in November with the extension of the DLR to Thamesmead. So I remain optimistic, and I hope the Shadow Minister can support me in this. But I also want to point out that if we are serious about new towns, we also must be serious about learning from the past. In terms of looking at the lessons. So if you just look at Milton Keynes, which is a new town from the 70s, I know that my honourable friend for Milton Keynes and North has been highlighting lessons that have come from that in terms of making sure that when we're looking at the future of the new towns, we don't make mistakes of the past and recognise the importance of the future. I know that he's been working alongside my honourable friend for Vauxhall and Camberwell Green, who is the chair of the housing communities and local government, and I know that they've been looking at evidence in terms of the new towns. The new towns, I feel, must build with existing communities in mind. This is something that has been echoed by past speakers. It's designed to bring real opportunity, identity and community to the people that will live here. And engagement must go beyond consultation. We must look at young people, families and future residents should help shape the identity of the place from the start. I also want to say that stewardship must be permanent, not temporary. There must be clear accountability for maintenance, renewal and adaptation as the town evolves over decades. One of the strong lessons from the past new towns is that housing numbers alone are not enough. We need to look at schools, health services, culture venues, transport links, and public spaces must be treated as priorities, not as an afterthought. We also need to look at how well-designed streets and public spaces work as well, because they're important as well. These are not luxuries, they shape how people feel and how they live and where they want to live. So we need to look at the right housing mix, which is vital. There are worrying examples from the past of a lack of provision for the elderly and those from different income levels, and worryingly from those of ethnic minority backgrounds. So new towns do have a bright future, but only if we apply those lessons to ensure they're inclusive, integrated and successful for the long term. I do believe that Thamesmead waterfront does offer a unique opportunity. It can serve existing communities, future residents and the wider London and national economy. So backing Thamesmead waterfront as a new town would provide additional momentum, helping align central government, the local council, transport plans and delivery partners. And with this ambition, leadership and long-term commitment alongside lessons learned from the past, Thamesmead waterfront can become a new town that genuinely improves lives, not just a housing scheme, but a place that people are proud to call home. I also wanted to raise with the Minister, and as I know decisions are being made at the moment, particularly on viability and delivery models, can the Minister clarify how new towns will continue to receive the long-term stewardship they will need so that they remain inclusive and well managed, and communities are not just decades, not just dying the build-out phase? That is something that I think is particularly important. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to conclude by saying that I do welcome the New Towns Task Force and the ambition of the government to deliver new towns as part of our wider goals to deliver more homes, economic growth and make Britain a better place to live. And I urge ministers to recognise the strength of the opportunity in Thamesmead as decisions are taken in the months ahead. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Florence Eshalomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I rise and thank and congratulate my honourable friend from Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch for securing this debate and her outlining her experience and her passion and in terms of representing a new town. When we talk about a generation of new towns, it's important we listen to the experience of current new towns like Cumbernauld, and I'm pleased to see many colleagues representing other new towns in the chamber today who I'm sure will give us a flavour of what they've seen in their areas. And it's important because we have to think about the challenges those towns have faced and what MPs in those areas are going to be saying in maybe 70 years' time when we've all left this place. The town and country planning associations network highlighted some of the common features in the 2021 report. They highlighted both the positive legacies of innovation, accessibility, social housing, but they also highlighted some of the challenges of new town renewal and the need for the whole-scale estate regeneration and not having rushed and poor quality housing. And if we want these new towns to last, it is critical that the government listen to the experiences of the new towns today to ensure that we get the placemaking element of those new town programmes right, to ensure that the current and future new towns get the support they need from the government to recognise the unique challenges each individual location faces. Now, in announcing the new towns, the government described the original New Towns programme as the most ambitious town building effort ever undertaken in the UK, saying it transformed the lives of millions of working people by giving them affordable and well-designed homes and well-planned and beautiful surroundings. In announcing the task force in July 2024, the then Deputy Prime Minister and the task force said that this is going to deliver the largest house building programme since post-war period. The new task force made 44 recommendations, and I'm sure that all members have read all those 44 recommendations. And they included making sure that the new towns are built to a density sufficient enough to enable residents to walk to local amenities, making sure that the support for public transport, unlocking social infrastructure, creating active and livable neighbourhoods, and establishing clear minimum density thresholds. Those new towns should also provide a diverse range of high-quality housing, an issue that many colleagues have already highlighted today. And this should also include a minimum target for 40% of affordable housing, of which at least half should be social rent. The new town should also support thriving communities by creating the access to the schools, the cultural, the sport and the healthcare facilities and other social infrastructures that meets the needs of residents from the outset. And he also states that the new towns, the starting point for the delivery of all these new towns should be the development corporation model. Yeah. Now, the government needs to be very clear on the interactions between the new towns and local housing need targets, which the Honourable Member for North Bedfordshire highlighted earlier on. The new towns task force found through their place investigation that strong support for homes delivery as part of the new towns should count towards local housing targets. And it was good to see the government and the minister welcome the task force recommendations and the government setting out their recommendations. And the government have announced that they are commencing with a strategic environment assessment to understand how the implication and the environmental implications will impact the new towns. And we heard that this assessment is going to come back and then make the final decisions on the locations. Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Minister to the House again to discuss the new towns. This is the second time this week in that we discussed this earlier at our Select Committee earlier this week on Tuesday, and I don't want to completely rehash that session, but I did want to follow up on a few things that were said during that session, and I hope that the Minister can give some answers to that. In response to the task force, the government agreed that the Development Corporation should be the primary delivery bodies for the new towns. Now, this is welcome. The Minister will recall that on Tuesday, in an answer to the question from my honourable colleague, the member for Milton Keynes North, that development corporations can sometimes take a long time to set up, and that this may come after rounds of consultations. I'd be keen to know from the Minister how soon after making any final decisions on locations will the government look to set up these development corporations. I know that the Minister is keen and we all want to see those spades in the ground on at least those 3 sites by the end of this Parliament. So does he expect that he will have those that the development corporations will be in place? Secondly, our committee recommended in our report earlier last year on land value capture that the government should enable greater use of tax increment financing instruments to fund the infrastructure for new towns. Now, this model allows local authorities to borrow money against anticipated tax receipts, resulting in future infrastructure. And this is something that was used by TfL to finance the London Underground Northern Line extension from Battersea to Nine Elms. And I should declare an interest in that. The lovely new Nine Elms station is in my constituency. And our committee heard that this could be used more widely across England as a way of financing this. So I want to know to the Minister, is the government considering this? And if not, why? Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister told our committee that the funding for the new towns will be coming from the Department's existing programmes, including the £39 billion Social and Affordable Homes programme. Now, this is a welcomed pot, the biggest investment we are seeing in the Affordable Homes programme, showing this government's commitment to making sure we build those much-needed new homes. The bidding for the Social and Affordable Homes programme opens next month, but the answers to our committee indicates that we will only see significant bidding on the vast majority of these sites into the early 2030s. So this could mean that those homes are down the line in many years to come. And in a sense, this will do very little to address the acute homelessness we are seeing now, which is facing over 300,000 people in the UK today. So I'd be grateful if the Minister could outline what discussions he's had with Homeless England in terms of maybe prioritising this funding from that pot, and if there'll be any new weighting given to the social housing in the shorter term. Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State told our Select Committee in November that he's committed to the new towns delivering 40% affordable, minimum affordable homes. The Minister told our committee on Tuesday that this is an aspiration and we cannot discount viability entirely. We know that affordable housing was at the centre of the task force report and at the centre of the government's recommendations in terms of placemaking and is part of the government's gold standard for new towns. Can the Minister confirm to the House that, as the Secretary of State highlighted to us in November, that he is committed to the recommendation that the new town should deliver a minimum of 40% affordable homes and at least half should be social rent? Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, stakeholders and members this afternoon have stressed the importance of local communities being involved in the new towns from the beginning. Dr. Victoria Hills, Chief Executive of the Royal Town and Planning Institute, said at one of our committee sessions, "The first wave of new towns showed what can be achieved when government and planners work at scale, but they also highlight the importance of getting the design, infrastructure and the community voice right from the very start. Public support for new towns will develop on learning those lessons and making sure they reflect on the aspirations of the people who will live and work there." And I know that the Minister is committed to ensuring that the public are brought along on this and the important principles of the community engagement and community leadership. So it's important that the government continue to listen to this, making sure that there are opportunities for local communities to shape the infrastructure, shape the vision, and make sure that everyone is committed to seeing that end goal of the new towns being built. I hope that the Minister will agree and share our ambition that the new towns opportunity offers a chance for looking at economic growth, supporting communities, building the much-needed new homes we know we desperately need. We can't keep saying we are in a housing crisis and not do anything about it. It will secure that national objectives and making sure we are getting the honest and good infrastructure at scale and pace. I thank the member for securing this debate, and I know that there will be many more discussions as we continue on this.
I won't put a formal time limit on, but if members keep their speeches to under 8 minutes, that will help everybody else. Tim Roca.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. In Macclesfield, there has been one topic dominating conversation for several months now, which is the proposed new town at Adlington. Every street corner, every coffee shop, every parish meeting. Well, almost every conversation, because for one glorious weekend, Adlington was briefly knocked off the top spot by the small matter of Macclesfield beating Crystal Palace in the FA Cup. And I know I'm on dangerous ground here because the Minister, I think, was brought up in South London, so I will just leave the football at that. But jokes aside, this is an important debate, and I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for securing it. I'm not a NIMBY. I support house building, I support development, and I support the principle of new towns, done well, in the right places, with proper planning, and in the right manner, with proper infrastructure. This country needs homes, especially genuinely affordable homes, and new towns have a proud history, as we've heard this afternoon, of delivering them when they're carefully planned, sensibly located. And I don't oppose that ambition, I welcome it. But supporting the principle of new towns does not mean signing a blank cheque for every proposed site, and it certainly doesn't mean abandoning the basics of good planning, which brings me to Adlington. Adlington is not an empty space on the map. It's a small rural community, about 1,000 people, first recorded in the Doomsday Book. It's a place shaped by continuity, fields, farms, it's still working farmland, still producing food, supporting local jobs, and sustaining wildlife. The proposal before Macclesfield would place up to 20,000 homes on 1,000 hectares of strategic greenbelt, wiping out 15 working farms, ancient hedgerows, bluebell woodlands, and fragmenting some of the most environmentally sensitive land in Cheshire. And that matters because the greenbelt isn't an accident. It exists for a reason, to stop urban sprawl, to protect countryside, and to make sure we regenerate brownfield land. And once greenbelt of this scale is gone, it's gone forever. And I want to make a point about the new Towns Task Force more broadly, the shortlist, because this is quite telling. Among all the sites recommended, Adlington stands out, not as the most suitable, but as the one that has faced the greatest opposition. And that opposition hasn't come from one group, one parish, or one campaign. It's come from across the community, across political lines, and across civic society. And I'm grateful to the Minister for meeting with me before Christmas to discuss those concerns. It's particularly striking that the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England, an organisation that has not opposed a number of the other Newtown sites recommended by the task force, has taken a clear and firm position against Adlington. So when they single out one site among many, it's because something genuinely doesn't stack up. And if that weren't enough, Madam Deputy Speaker, Cheshire East Council, the local authority, has voted unanimously against the proposal. Unanimously. In local government, that almost never happens. And that vote alone should tell us that this isn't a narrow ideological objection. It's a considered judgment by the democratically elected planning authority for the area. And so I want to talk a little bit more about Cheshire East because it really matters. It's not a council that avoids building homes. It's met its housing targets in the past consistently. It's adopted a sound local plan, delivered thousands of homes, and continues to do so. It's not a planning authority that's dragging its feet or shirking its responsibilities. They're now preparing a new local plan which will set out how housing need will be met in years ahead, transparently, democratically, and with proper public engagement. And that is how planning should work. They've delivered before, and with their new plan they'll deliver again, but without dropping 20,000 homes into the open countryside against the opposition of local communities. So opposing this site doesn't mean opposing housing, it means respecting the plan-led system rather than bypassing it. I mentioned brownfield land, Madam Deputy Speaker. There are brownfield sites across Cheshire, across Greater Manchester, and across the wider region that are crying out for regeneration, many of them close to jobs, transport, schools, and services. Building there first isn't anti-growth, it's sustainable planning. Indeed, there are alternative Newtown sites in the northwest that could be considered as well. So let's not jump straight into one of the most sensitive stretches of greenbelt in the region, next to a national park. Let's think again. And powerful points have been made about infrastructure already this afternoon. These concerns have not been convincingly addressed. Adlington has limited rail services, constrained road capacities, utilities that were never designed to support a town 20 times its current size. Fixing that would take decades, not years, and there remains no clear answer about who pays, who delivers, or when any of it would realistically be in place. And it's been compounded by the way that we've gone about this, Madam Deputy Speaker. We need engagement with residents. There's only been one engagement session by the company Bellport with local residents. Communities have been left scrambling for information about the proposal. And that's not how you build confidence in a major national project. So before I finish, I want to thank local campaigners and activists, people who never expected to become planning experts, transport analysts or ecology specialists, but who have given up their evenings, their weekends, and savings, indeed, to engage constructively, responsibly, and in good faith. They've not shouted from the sidelines. They've done the hard work of evidence, scrutiny, and civic engagement. And that's democracy at its best. They deserve recognition. So let me be absolutely clear once more, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is not about saying no to development. It's about saying not like this and not here. We should be building in homes where infrastructure already exists, where growth can be absorbed sustainably, where local authorities are partners rather than bystanders, and where the environmental cost is justified by an overwhelming and proven need. Adlington does not meet that test. And so I'll end with a little bit of history, Madam Deputy Speaker, because this House likes its history. In the office of the Minister hangs a picture of Clement Attlee, who I think is a hero to both of us. It was Attlee's government that created the Greenbelt, precisely to protect landscapes like this from unchecked development. It wasn't anti-housing, it was pro-planning. It's about balance, it's about foresight, it's about stewardship. So we owe it to that legacy and to future generations to show that same care now. So let's support new towns, let's build the homes our country needs, but let us also say calmly and clearly, in the Attlee spirit, Adlington is the wrong place. Thank you.
Shaun Davies.
It's a privilege to follow my honourable friend who's just spoken. We are a little bit further ahead than he or other new towns are going to be, having been designated in the 1960s. I'd also like to congratulate my honourable friend for securing this debate and her powerful words. We were a second phase and learnt from her community's journey into Newtown. And it's a delight to see my honourable friend, the Minister, in his place, responding for the government. And unlike so many of his predecessors, a housing minister that not only understands housing, but has been in his position longer than a few minutes. New towns like Telford, Cumbernauld and East Kilbride, and the hundreds of thousands of people who live there, are the physical embodiments of hope and opportunity, first made possible, as we've already heard, by the Attlee governments. New towns gave families like mine a chance for a new life. The increase in affordable, high-quality housing made home ownership and renting away from the big cities possible for people who could never, ever dream that would be their future or their reality. They weren't just life-changing for the newcomers to those new towns, but for those like my family who were in the area before the new town designation. And they saw the opportunities for their children and their grandchildren that they could not dream of themselves. But there are lessons, as the chair of the Select Committee has quite clearly outlined, that these new towns need to learn from those that came before them. Because new towns aren't only important as symbols of hope and aspiration, they are incredible achievements in their own right. Telford still grows at a rate unlike almost any other town in the country, with 1,800 new homes being built last year alone. Despite being one of the biggest and most YIMBY towns in the country, Telford excels in its access to nature. Thanks to the local authority, since its existence, Telford has designated 20 local nature reserves covering 600 hectares, more than 300 protected green spaces, more green flag green parks than ever before. And these spaces are loved and cared for by volunteers like Richard Shaw of Rick's Environmental and thousands of street champions and countless friends groups who take love and passion and pride in their communities. New towns were built on a principle. People don't just live in houses, they live in homes, in communities. They need schools, jobs, healthcare, transport and green spaces. And Telford is a community that is thriving, thanks to the dedication of groups like Telford Community Support and Telford Crisis Support. New towns continue to offer unique opportunities. Thanks to good transport links, Telford has become a hub of industry and manufacturing in particular in regards to the defence sector, with the RBSL manufacturing tanks and employing over 1,500 people, but also major centres for Kraft Heinz, Best Block, Bridge Cheese and more. For a new town like Telford, it also has history. It has a claim as the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution with Iron Bridge and Coburg Dale. And I would like to pay tribute to Marcus Keane of Telford Memories and Steve Bowers of Telford Ultimate Guide for the work that they do in promoting Telford's proud history and rich diversity. And also to people like Dennis Athersmith of Dawley Memories, who celebrate what came before Telford's designation. But we do need more, Madam Deputy Speaker. More like the M54-M6 link road that was proposed at the same time as the designation of Telford but has never come to fruition, thankfully promised by this government. A direct train link from Telford to London, scrapped under the last Conservative government with plans to reinstate it with this one. Better buses, a town that was designed for cars, means that our bus transport system is limited. And perhaps one day we can dream of a metro system. For decades, governments have failed to keep up and support new towns. New towns have grown significantly above the regional and national averages, and particularly at times when the rest of the national economy has stalled, new towns have continued to power on. But that has resulted in new towns not getting its fair share of enablement funding. And I also will refer to what other honourable members have said about housing. Houses, in particular around South Telford, were built with a life expectancy of 30 or 40 years. Now, 60 years later, they need regeneration. But for the last 14 years, we've not had an ambitious programme of estate renewal, and I ask the Minister to consider what this government can do with in regards to that. But we're also seeing an ageing population, Madam Deputy Speaker, with those people that came to Telford 60 years ago now in their 70s, 80s and 90s, and we have the 4th highest growth in the elderly population in England. Today, I welcome the renewed interest in new towns, thanks to this government's agenda to build 3 new towns. And I hope that the Minister and those new towns will look to places like Telford and other new towns for inspiration. But as Captain Matthew Webb said, the first person to swim the English Channel, nothing great is easy. And we must measure the new towns not in 10 years, but in 50, 60 and 100 years, so that they can realise their potential. As the new towns are built, the government should also turn to the former new towns, experienced towns, and in some cases, the new cities, to understand how the mistakes that were made, frankly, around town centre positioning can be avoided, and to invest and back them. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have 3 specific asks for my honourable friend, the Minister. One is to ask each existing new town, with a record of delivery, what it needs to do to break through the Whitehall machine to reach its next phase of opportunity. If the government has got, and I genuinely do believe the government has an ambition to get the economy growing and to build those houses, why not look to those areas that have already been doing it for decades before and give them the opportunity to contribute to that national mission? 2, as I've already mentioned, learn from those new towns. In Telford, it was the council, not Homes England, that delivered new homes. It remodelled town centres. It created, converted a shopping centre into a place where universities are springing up, where people are now living. And that new town centre identity will be so important to Telford's next story. And 3, as the 1980s advert said, come to Telford. I would love to take the Minister on a tour of communities like Lightmoor, Bourneville Village, and shown the history and the beauty of Iron Bridge Gorge, the future, whether the new theatre being backed by government funding, the new swimming pool in Dorley, the home of the first person to swim the English Channel, or take him to Southwater, our new town centre, where people like Dan Blasnick has continued to campaign and to turn that place from a shopping centre into a town centre. Or to see the amazing Anstice Hall in Madeley, a former working men's club that has now been regenerated with a fantastic all-female leadership team, and so much more. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll close on this. If this government backs these new towns in the same way that Attlee and previous Labour governments did, there is a moment in history for this government and this housing minister. So in 50, 60 and 70 years' time, they can look back and see the legacy of this government. Thank you.
Speaking limit of 7 minutes, Chris Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable friend not just for securing this debate, but the very passionate and moving speech she gave at the start of it. I'm going to start by building on some of the comments made by the honourable member for North Bedford, as when he was talking about speaking to his constituents and their experiences of what is potentially the beginning of a new town process. It reminded me of a conversation I had coming back from Labour Party conference 2.5 years ago, when we in opposition at the time announced that if we won the election, we would move forward with the New Towns programme. I got back, maybe slightly worse for wear, 2 Milton Keynes, popped into the family home to see my 92-year-old grandmother at the time, with her friend Georgie in the living room. The two of them grew up in a small farmhouse in a small village at the time of Woolston. About 300 people. It's since been consumed into what is now Milton Keynes. And they were talking, as they often did, about how things used to be, the roads they knew by name, the rivalry between the cricket teams and the local pubs in that small village. And also spoke about, just as we heard from some of the conversations that I'm sure are happening in Thamesmead, their fear at the time about what change would bring with the New Town programme to their communities, how it would change the tight-knit community that they were used to and grew up in, and the very many concerns about what it would mean for local culture, local infrastructure. And I think it's very easy for us politicians just to stop there in our conversations with local constituents. But I think when I went with that conversation was a little bit further. And it was, you know, she would talk about how actually she lived long enough to see what a difference the community that was built in Milton Keynes, my hometown, I'm the first MP to be born and grew up in the new town of Milton Keynes, made to the lives of her daughter and her grandchildren. I owe almost everything to the fantastic start that Milton Keynes gave me in life, because it meant that my parents could afford decent and affordable housing. It meant that there were good and decent jobs available because of what the Development Corporation did. It meant that public services were there when we needed them. And there's talk about, I mean, just like Thamesmead, Milton Keynes was built on a floodplain, the River Ouse floodplain, which again I know is often a concern for people. The Development Corporation's solution for that was to build balancing lakes. And, you know, her and Georgie were pretty opposed to the balancing lake at the time. It was fields next to the farm she grew up on. Massive diggers and slurry everywhere coming in. She used to call it that daft puddle. But actually what that does today is not just provide flood protection and alleviation because of what the Development Corporation was able to achieve, pretty significant infrastructure project to tens of thousands of homes, allowing the building of the city I call home. It also means that my city has 5,000 acres of beautiful blue and green spaces that are enjoyed by thousands of people. It's also the lake where my parents met, learning, my dad teaching my mum, not particularly well, to learn to sail, because also the city was really determined to ensure that recreational activities were available to people, whatever their background. And I lost my grandmother just before Labour Party conference last year, and the hospice that looked after her in the last weeks of her life looked out over that very same lake. And I mention this just to say that the story of my life, the reason I'm here, I owe so much to the vision, the confidence, the level of ambition that was shown to build somewhere truly special in Milton Keynes in the 1960s and 1970s. And I think it is only with that same level of confidence and that same level of ambition that we can hope to have people talk so positively about the work we are doing now, as I can talk about the work that was done by the Milton Keynes Development Corporation in the 1960s and 70s. I'll just mention a few points that potentially make me nervous about whether we are going to fulfil that ambition, some of which were mentioned by the chair of the Select Committee, particularly in relation to where we are. These projects are not going to come cheap to the government. We obviously need to maximise the financing options that we can use, and we're also going to need to look at maximising the amount of land value capture. Now, Milton Keynes was given 700 million quid in the 1960s. If you wrap that up to today's money, that's about 14 billion. I don't think anybody is looking at that level of ambition for a new town project. But it is going to have to be money. And that money came back to the government multiple times over because of the economic value that was generated by the building of the city. But we are going to have to see money, not just capital money and direction to those pots of money that are available on capital, but also revenue spending in order to set up the Development Corporation. And I don't think we've seen enough from the department about that approach yet. Secondly, I fear about death by consultation. We've obviously had, a process in order to come up with a list of new towns, a very good piece of work done by Sir Michael Lyons, and I think we should all pay tribute to the work that he did on this project. But now we've got a government response to that, which has taken further months. There will be a consultation on that, and if development corporations are set up, further consultation on that. So we do need to look at how we can streamline the process and get these projects going as quickly as possible. And the final concern I'll just raise is, in conversations with local councils at the moment, it seems like there has been an approach from the team working on this to go back to that kind of begging bowl culture, to turn around to the sites that have been selected, and obviously Milton Keynes is one of those sites, and to be asking them, even though Michael Lyons did the work, for why these 12 sites were correct, but asking them to go back and convince them that they should get the resources that are going to be required to deliver what the government is saying needs to be delivered. And I think that is not going to lead to success. Just one example. A big part of the report was talking about the importance of building communities that are not dependent on the car, that have good public transport options. If you take my area, which is very car dependent, and if we are going to continue to grow, we're going to need that support from DfT in order to do so. the approach from DfT has been, why do you need this money? Your roads aren't congested yet. And that is completely out of line with the government's ambition and the new town's approach. So we need to change the culture for, I think, how the government is approaching this new town programme if it's going to be a success. And if in decades to come, somebody could be standing in this chamber talking about being the first MP for the new town of Thamesmead and talking there about how much of a success this programme has been. Thank you.
Miss Bloore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me begin by congratulating my honourable friend for securing this debate and for her tireless advocacy for her community. 62 years ago, Redditch was selected as the West Midlands' second Mark II new town after somewhere called Telford. A deliberate policy decision to relieve the post-war housing crisis gripping Birmingham and the wider conurbation. Unlike the first generation of new towns, Redditch was not built on empty land. It had over 800 years of history and an existing population of around 32,000. Planners therefore faced a unique challenge: how to expand a living town, not replace it. That is why Redditch matters so much to this debate. It's a story of ambition, achievement, and unfinished business that offers powerful lessons about what worked, what was not sustained, and what must we do differently today. Redditch wasn't simply given a population target and left to chance. The Redditch Development Corporation, led by Chief Architect Brian Bunch and his team, delivered an innovative master plan published in 1967, built around bead-like districts along key transport routes. Each neighbourhood was designed to be largely self-contained, with schools, shops, churches and green space, while preserving green corridors between communities and a plethora of roundabouts. The aim was to integrate old and new, bringing together town and country. MPs in this place later praised the generous landscaping and planting of open areas, amenities far beyond what normal local authority budgets could have delivered. Redditch also pioneered something radical for its time, a new town designed around public transport rather than the private car. 3 million trees were planted, roads were banked to reduce noise, pedestrians were separated from fast-moving traffic. Those were not luxuries, they were choices about quality of life. Within 2 decades, a town of 32,000 had grown into a community of more than 70, eventually reaching around 90,000 by the end of the century, many families escaping overcrowded terraces and the slums in Birmingham. The estates that emerged, Churchill, Matchborough, Winyates, Greenlands and Woodrow, were planned communities where working families could own their own homes, raise children and access to schools, parks and services within walking distance. Arrow Valley Country Park remains one of the great successes of new town planning. 900 acres of protected green space at the heart of Redditch. Historic sites were preserved too, the Forge Mill Needle Museum and Bordesley Abbey, anchoring centuries of history within a modern town. In 1983, Queen Elizabeth II opened the Kingfisher Shopping Centre and Forge Mill National Needle Museum. Thousands lined the streets in Millwood Square. The Queen unveiled Edoardo Palazzi's mosaics, celebrating Redditch's needle-making heritage, astronauts and needles side by side, symbolising past and future. The chair of the Development Corporation, Professor Dennis Hinton, said at the time this marked the completion of an enterprise of which everyone can be proud. But Redditch wasn't just built on being a new town, it had manufacturing at the heart of its DNA. It produced 19% in the early 20th century of the world's needles, not cottage craft but precision metalworking at scale. Those skills fed into bicycles, motorcycles, springs and defence manufacturing. Royal Enfield, BSA, aerospace components, Redditch had industrial DNA. During the Second World War, high-duty alloys employed 13,000 people producing aircraft for Rolls-Royce and others. Post-war, those same skills flew in Concorde and British defence systems. The Development Corporation understood this. The new town was deliberately planned around a manufacturing-led economy, not a dormitory suburb, but a place with skilled local employment. For a time, that promise was kept. The landscaping and design principles established by Hugh Wilson, Lewis Womersley and their teams proved durable. But something changed. Something fundamental changed when the Housing Corporation was wound up in 1985. Housing targets were met, but the commitment to self-sustaining local economy faded. Cheap imports hollowed out traditional industries. Over time, Redditch became increasingly a commuter town for Birmingham. Between 2007 and 2017, the UK lost 600,000 manufacturing jobs. Redditch, with twice the national average employment in manufacturing, was hit harder than most. Today, manufacturing output has declined even more, where employment remains. Skill pathways have narrowed, the defence and aerospace sector survived, but a fraction of its former scale. Even core services have faced sustained pressure. The Alexandria Hospital has lost services like paediatric services and maternity services, undermining public confidence and reminding us that infrastructure built once still requires long-term support. And underpinning all of this are social pressures. Drugs, crime, child poverty. Over half of the Redditch households experience at least one form of deprivation. Neighbourhoods built as modern housing for working families, like Greenlands and Woodrow, are now designated as areas of such concentrated deprivation that they qualify for £20 million of targeted regeneration funding. I welcome that investment, but it should give us pause. This was not the future those planners envisaged. What Redditch teaches us is that new towns worked when they combined 5 key things: a clear social purpose, long-term institutions, integrated employment, infrastructure built up front, community cohesion by design. Redditch achieved all of these things between the 1960s and 1980s. We lost momentum when that comprehensive approach was abandoned. The lesson is not that new towns failed, it's that when we stop thinking long-term, stop planning for jobs and stop backing places with sustained investment, we broke that model. As we debate new towns today, we must ask, are we prepared to commit to the same level of ambition that created Redditch, or will we settle for the piecemeal fixes after decline that has already set in? My constituents are proud of Redditch's Newtown heritage, but pride alone will not secure its future. To honour that legacy, we must renew it with long-term investment, integrated planning, and the political will to see it through. That is not nostalgia, it is a hard-headed realism about what works and what my constituents deserve.
Chris Vince.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank my honourable friend from Kirkintilloch and Cumbernauld for, the other way around, for securing this debate. It's one that I'm hugely passionate about and gives me an opportunity to have 7 minutes to talk about Harlow. So thank you very much. How do you begin to describe a new town like Harlow? Do you talk about the houses, the bricks and the mortar, the gardens and the trees? Or do you talk about the people, the young and the old, and everyone in between? I think you start with the people. But I'm going to start, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, with the history. Harlow was designated a new town in 1947 as part of the post-war reconstruction. Many people moved to Harlow from London to start a family, coining Harlow its first nickname, Pramtown. The master plan for Harlow was drawn up by Sir Frederick Gibbard with the help of Dame Sylvia Crowe and others. It was designed to have a sense of community, with every neighbourhood having its own shopping centre, its own shopping hatch, a play park and green spaces, and its own public art. I don't think, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are many places that you can walk down the street, go into an estate and come across a Rodin or a Barbara Hepworth just on your daily rounds, or in fact the odd concrete donkey. And that sense of community still shines through today. It shines through every time I go and watch Harlow Town Football Club, every time I pop for a pint in the Hare, visit the art studios at Palmdon Mill or the Gibbard Gardens, or visit our beautiful town park for the park run, which I'm doing slightly more often than usual. We see that sense of community, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the many incredibility charities and community organisations that Harlow has, many of whom I've had the pleasure to visit during my 18 months as Harlow's MP, and 2 of which, the Youth Concern Trust and Raised Roof, I have the absolute honour to be a trustee of. We see it in the way our town supported one another during the terrible pandemic. And yes, how people in Harlow often support me as well. Gibbard's design for the estates, I can absolutely echo what my honourable friend said about the housing numbers. I would defy anyone to walk around Lumbunks and try and explain to me the logic around that sort of numbering system, I can assure you. It was also designed to be a place where managers and workers lived side by side as part of that same community with that same ambition to achieve. And I think that's something that we've lost sight of a little bit as some of the issues that my honourable member for Redditch mentioned about the decline in manufacturing, which has had a huge impact on places like Harlow as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, I said in this place a number of times, Harlow might not be the oldest new town. I was waiting for an intervention from my honourable friend from Stevenage.
My honourable friend, can my honourable friend for Harlow confirm which is the oldest new town in the UK?
I think my humble friend from Stevenage knows fairly well. But it's nearly the oldest new town. And it might not be the best, or I think it is the best, although it's probably not the best if you're a fan of being able to park your car anywhere near your house. But it absolutely is the new town, Madam Deputy Speaker, with the biggest heart. I hope that when this government looks at the creation of a new generation of new towns, it will look at the things that did work in Harlow. Because creating a new town isn't just about bricks and mortar, about trees and gardens. It's about people and communities too. I am proud to represent Harlow with its history, but I'm determined that Harlow will have a strong future as well. And the commitment last year from this government to ensure that the UK Health Security Agency will have its permanent home in Harlow is huge for this country. As I mentioned earlier, the decline in the manufacturing industry has had an impact on Harlow. We have seen some of that industry go. We are still got some fantastic industry in terms of Raytheon and other really important manufacturing businesses, but of course we've seen that decline. And I absolutely agree with comments from my honourable friends about the importance of the need for continual investment in our new towns to see them survive and thrive for the future, and the importance of that long-term stewardship. Just one anecdotal fact about Harlow before I wind up, Madam Deputy Speaker, wind up the bit, Madam Deputy Speaker maybe, is Harlow's fantastic cycle network. Now, of course, they need more investment, and I would always push Essex County Council to continue to invest in our cycle network. But an interesting fact about Harlow is you can get one side to the other without ever going on a main road because of our fantastic cycle network and our green wedges and green fingers, which are hugely important to that sense of community. Madam Deputy Speaker, everybody deserves a place in the history of Harlow, even those like me who came to Harlow from afar. And together we are the perfect blend.
That sounded more like a maiden speech, but Kevin Bonavia.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a pleasure to become second on this occasion to my honourable friend, member for Harlow. And we in Stevenage, we may not have a concrete donkey. We do have a donkey park, and we do have a concrete polar bear in Chels, which we were very, very proud of. I would also like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, for securing this really important debate on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of her new town. Now, my new town of Stevenage is celebrating its 80th anniversary as the first new town in the UK this year. And as it shares its birth year with the birth year of my mum, whose actually 80th birthday is today. So after celebrating my new town, I will be celebrating with her later. And my mum was born and grew up in Glasgow. And like many people growing up in the 50s and 60s, they sought a new life. She didn't end up in Cumbernauld. She went up a circuitous route via Malta and then back to London. And, you know, she had ambition for her family, and as did my dad John, my brother Gary, and I ended up in Stevenage. And this is a town that's really welcomed me as somebody who wanted to start a new life there. And that is a story of new towns, where people, it's not just, you know, if you get lucky enough to be born there and grow up there, but you choose to live there and start a new life, and your aspiration becomes your community's aspiration. And that is the story of new towns. But as I'm sure my honourable friend the Minister is finding now, creating and developing new towns isn't easy. And one of his predecessors, the Minister for Housing, Lewis Silkin, came to what was then the large village of Stevenage in the 1940s and arrived to see the sign of Stevenage Station being marked out and replaced with Silkengrad. He was not assured of a warm welcome. But that minister had determination, and he said, we're going to build this town. And so we did, and it was really, really a huge achievement. And it showed the benefit of planning, thinking ahead, thinking about the kind of homes people need, but not just the homes, the schools, the jobs, the parks. If you come to Stevenage to this day, the first impression you will get is how green is this place. And if you're lucky enough to be able to work in Stevenage itself, whether you live there or you come there for work, you'll find how easy it is to get to that work. And we have great companies that have developed over generations. Generations of people have worked at what is now MBDA and Airbus in the aerospace and defence sectors. Over a quarter of satellites in space are made in Stevenage. Missiles, the Storm Shadow missiles, are made in Stevenage that are sent to Ukraine to help in the defence of against the horrific invasion by Putin's Russia. So new towns like Stevenage play their part. But a debate's really important today because it's, like many members of this House said today, it's a lessons from new towns and what can we do to rejuvenate new towns. My honourable friend came to Stevenage weeks after the general election with Sir Michael Lyons, and he was there with fellow minister there, Baroness Sharon Taylor. Stevenage grown, and she herself has helped shape Stevenage and is doing a great job shaping homes across this country. And what they saw was a new development in the town centre, new affordable homes to deal with today's housing crisis. And it was Stevenage was built in response to the housing crisis back then. So the challenge now is even more immense because Stevenage once had 38,000 council homes. That's down to 8,000. And I've knocked on doors where I've seen people living private rent there, and they have that insecurity. This government is working to fix that. But we need to get those new homes, and we need to rejuvenate our town centres, as has been said previously. And that ain't easy, because the lesson from development corporations was what you do once you've got them up and running and have done their job. And what happened in Stevenage was in 1980, it was transferred to hedge funds and pension companies, and it's so much harder now to rejuvenate those town centres. And that's one of the biggest things I get on the doorstep. Homes and what's happening in that town centre. So we really, really have to not just learn the lessons for new towns, but for our existing new towns, we need to make sure that we will reshape them. Now, Stevenage remains ambitious. We have a council and a council leader in Richard Henry who's leading the push for a £1 billion regeneration project in the town centre, including Stevenage Gateway, which will need government support, a new station, new homes, new education facilities right in the heart of our town. Because Stevenage isn't a commuter town, well, many people do come and go from Stevenage for work, but it is also a community with neighbourhoods, with amazing individuals who I'm very proud to cite time in and time out in this place. And they didn't just turn up by luck. It's because people had the foresight. Lewis Silkin, Monica Felton, Eric Claxton, these were the pioneers of Stevenage. We now have the chance to learn from them as we build our new towns for the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The brilliant, transformative Labour government of 1945 accepted and endorsed the idea of investing in the construction of new towns as a way of providing much improved living conditions for people throughout our nation. I'm delighted that this Labour government again does that today. And I'm proud to be the MP for Glenrothes, the second post-war new town in Scotland following East Kilbride, which was born on the 13th of June in 1948, when the Development Corporation was set up under the New Towns Act. And of course, we are proud to be where my honourable friend, the member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, grew up, and I congratulate her on securing this debate today, which I think has been a really good debate on the past of new towns and on their future as well. And the purpose for Glenrothes to be established was to generate economic growth and renewal in central Fife. And the town has achieved this despite great setbacks, even at its foundation, and it's a story for Glenrothes which I think can inspire us to tackle the challenges which new towns face today. Because initially, the reason Glenrothes was founded was to support the development of a newly established national coal board super pit called the Rothes Colliery in 1958, which hardly ever worked at all because it was had a plethora of problems, much like the Conservative Party, such as flooding and geological faults. And when the pit closed, further development of Glenrothes almost came to a halt. But the people of Glenrothes didn't give up, and either did Fife Council, and the Development Corporation targeted the growing electronics industry to attract them to the town, and Glenrothes became an important centre for light industry. The town played a significant role in establishing Scotland's Silicon Glen, with many high-tech companies investing in the area. And as my honourable friend said in her speech opening this debate, it shows how new towns have to reinvent themselves and are soon not new and have to look towards the future. And that's what we're doing today in Glenrothes, where we are already the administrative centre for Fife, and we maintain a strong presence in the technology and manufacturing sectors. With a population of just under 40,000, Glenrothes is the third largest settlement in Fife after Dunfermline and Kirkcaldy, and looking to the future with investment in pride of place in my constituency, in Methil and Buckhaven nearby Glenrothes, and also in our regional growth zone, new funding for which was announced by Douglas Alexander, Secretary of State for Scotland, last week. While we can't boast either concrete polar bears or concrete donkeys, we do have concrete hippos, for which are greatly valued in the town and for which we are renowned. In terms of business, the reason that many companies continue to make Glenrothes their base is that the town has a great location in the centre of Scotland. We have much to be thankful for in terms of investment in our infrastructure. It is an attractive destination to invest, but the town does face significant challenges. And we know about the challenges faced by many new towns. We've heard about them in the debate today. And indeed, the Communities and Local Government Select Committee report of 2008 identified 3 particular infrastructure problems facing new towns throughout the UK: transport, town centre investment, and housing design and public space. And I think we've heard throughout today's debate these are still issues which affect our new towns. And certainly it's the case in Glenrothes that the idea of a 20-minute neighbourhood is a distant prospect still in our communities, and rail connectivity in particular is poor. So I will take a brief intervention from my...
Thank him for taking an intervention, particularly Madam Speaker, and I've already spoken. One of the issues that Harlow did have is they kind of built the M11 on the wrong side, so you have all these big long lorries going all the way through Harlow to get to the industrial side. So is it, on the industrial sites on the other side of the town. So would he agree with me? Actually, it's really important that when we design these new towns, we really make sure we get that transport infrastructure absolutely right.
I could not agree more with my honourable friend. I mean, in history, it's certainly in rail connectivity in new towns in Scotland, the railway stations are either not there at all in the town or a great distance away from the town centre. So we have to learn those lessons for the future. And certainly looking at issues, for example, in town centres, the Kingdom Centre in Glenrothes is the centre and the high street of the town, but it's ageing. It needs to have investment in its infrastructure and requires a collective approach to offering new retail and entertainment opportunities. We need more community facilities in our housing estates, and we have an ageing housing stock where homes are not energy efficient, they're expensive to heat, and in a town where 20% of children are living in relative poverty, it's one of many strains on low-income households in the town with families struggling with the increasing costs of living. And that's why it's so important this government to action on energy bills, and the fact that housing stock in new towns is too often too aged and needs to be improved is a key issue for that area of policy. And the sad reality is that years of underinvestment in local authorities under a Scottish National Party government has resulted in a housing crisis across Scotland. And Glenrothes, established to address these challenges in the first place, is no exception. Fife Council has a housing stock of around 30,000 properties, but a waiting list of around 13,000 people, really badly affecting so many people in my constituents in Glenrothes. Yet the Scottish Government's budget announced on Tuesday gave a rise of just 2% to local authorities, despite record-breaking block grants for the Scottish Government, with Labour delivering an additional £10.3 billion for public services in Scotland since the last election. A 2% increase for councils will not address the challenges faced by new towns in Scotland. And these towns, after all, as my honourable friend said, they're not new anymore. They're not preserved in aspect. They need investment. And the establishment of new towns shows that change is inevitable, but that the principles and values which inspired their creation remain constant. And we need to hold on to those ideals, the ideals which created Glenrothes and other new towns in the first place. We need to continue to strive for progress, for growth, for modernity, both in our built infrastructure, as well as our transport and connectivity, as well as in our public services, in education and health in our new towns. And for that, we need to have leadership from government at all levels. And in Scotland, that means a Scottish Government with a vision to actively support local authorities, to support those authorities which do have responsibility for new towns, like Fife Council, to achieve the positive change which our new towns now are in badly need of, and that means investment. And that's why we need a Scottish Government capable of making new towns like Glenrothes feel new again.
The member for Stevenage mentioned it was his mother's birthday, and I've been given an update. The mother is called Yvonne Bonavia. So happy birthday, Yvonne. I now call Chris Hinchliff.
Mr. Speaker, the Government's determination to deliver a new generation of new towns with everything residents will need for a thriving and fulfilling life offers a much more hopeful solution to the housing crisis in this country than the proliferation of overpriced and characterless bolt-on estates thrown up by profiteering developers in recent years. As ministers press on with these plans, I'd like to highlight some of what can be learnt from the radical and transformative history of previous such projects, because of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, the development of new towns in this country grew out of the Garden City movement. And the very first and best garden city in the world is Letchworth Garden City in my constituency, and I won't take any interventions. The principles on which Letchworth was founded offer several lessons which I believe should now inform the plans for future new towns. Firstly, that the land on which the town will be constructed and the large rural greenbelt they need for healthy recreation and the supply of food should be brought into common ownership. This was always absolutely central to securing Ebenezer Howard's vision of the best of countryside and city life. This means having the ability to encourage industry through access to cheap sites, being able to keep housing affordable by capturing rising land values and using ground rents to fund community assets. To this day, the fact that Letchworth Heritage Foundation continues to have a substantial property portfolio allows it to invest in and subsidise many facilities that enrich life in the town, including the Garden City Greenway, the Broadway Cinema and Standalone Farm. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, lesson number one is that the development corporations for the next generation of new towns must be empowered to purchase all the land they need at current use value through CPOs if necessary. Secondly, Madam Deputy Speaker, we must always remember that the purpose of garden cities was never just about the supply of housing. From the outset, Letchworth was always envisioned as a way to bring employment and industry to a depressed rural economy. In short, new towns need a purpose, not just a housing target to hit. Communities thrive and grow around the industries that define them, and without this, new towns will never escape the rather dismal fate of becoming little more than a commuter dormitory. So as we build the new towns of the future, we must be clear from the outset about what the economic anchor institutions of those communities will be, whether they will be new university towns, born as Cambridge was, by scholars ready to set up fresh seats of learning to rival those of the past, or new industrial sites for green technology. We must ensure that there is a clear economic identity defining the existence of future new towns. Thirdly, in an era in which a tiny proportion of our homes are actually designed by architects, the Royal Institute of the British Architects have estimated just 6% are, we should strive to match the optimism of the Garden City movement, which sought to prove that beautiful, bright and well-built homes could be made affordable for ordinary people. To this day, the arts and craft-inspired architecture of Letchworth makes an incredibly special place, and as we build the next new towns, we should suffuse them with the same values and the same determination to provide genuinely affordable homes alongside constant proof that life is beautiful. That means commissioning architects to shape unique and inspiring local vernaculars that create a special identity for each town. It means embracing aesthetics and ornamentation as well as functionality. And it means patient public capital investing over the long term, above all in a high proportion of desperately needed council homes for social rent. In the context of the Office for Environmental Protection's warning that we are largely off target for the UK's environmental commitments, it is also absolutely crucial that future new towns follow the Garden City model of development in harmony with nature. Letchworth was built without cutting down a single mature tree, and there is no reason we cannot do the same now. Similarly, we must match the importance in Garden City principles of a well-protected green belt, securing permanent and easy access for the inhabitants of new towns to the peace and joy of a countryside next door that is teeming with wildlife. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, while not all of Ebenezer Howard's vision ultimately came to fruition, and like all towns, Letchworth has its own challenges today, the strength of the community it continues to foster nearly 125 years after it was founded should shape the policies we pursue to support the new towns to come. From decarbonised Letchworth to Wilbury Community Cafe and the Friends of Norton Common, the ordinary residents of Letchworth are a constant source of energy, passion and determination to tackle the challenges we face as a society, from environmental collapse to loneliness and the cost of living. The Labour government should foster and embrace these grassroots movements by combining new towns with a new drive to put power back in the hands of ordinary people, to give new communities the ability to shape their lives and their local area in a way that meets their hopes for the future. We need a new Charter of Community Rights. Fortunately, Madam Deputy Speaker, the amendment I tabled to the Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill to do just that has, I believe, recently been retabled in the other place, providing the government with an excellent opportunity to rectify its oversight in failing to adopt the Charter when I first brought it to this House. Designed to put power back in the hands of ordinary people, the Charter for Community Rights offers a starting point for restoring popular agency in our democracy, which I believe is an essential ingredient to getting new towns right. With a right to a clean and healthy environment, a right to a healthy home, a right to play, a right to grow food on public sector land, a right to roam and swim, to participate in decisions shaping communities, and a right to challenge local decisions. Adopting the Charter for Community Rights is the final ingredient to ensuring this government's new towns are genuine communities capable of nurturing social life and cohesion from the outset. And that, Madam Deputy Speaker, should be an objective we can all share.
Andrew Lewin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I must start by congratulating my honourable friend, Member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, for a powerful but also a deeply personal speech. And I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, that has been the theme of this afternoon. Sons and daughters of new towns, but also stories of people who have come to new towns and made their lives there. And it is the case that each new town has its charm, its own history and unique identity. They are home today to 2.8 million people. And just as the post-war New Towns programme was integral to rebuilding the country after the war, this government's ambition for 12 new communities is one of the most important of this Parliament. Yeah. In my maiden speech in this place, I celebrated the history of Hatfield and Welwyn Garden City, but emphasised the importance of regeneration and investment. For places to thrive, they can't be static. Every town needs to evolve and renew for the future. In that first speech, I referenced the iconic shredded wheat silos that have sadly laid dormant next to Welwyn Garden City train station for years. And I'm very pleased to report to the House and my community that since I made that speech, planning permission has been granted for a 578-home development. Crucially, the silos will be maintained and all its history, and the developer, Treble 8, is proposing to transform them and to create a sky bar and restaurant at the summit. There are lots of people in the town who are really excited about this, and it's precisely the type of imagination and investment that we need in our towns. The sooner the building work begins, the better. In Hatfield, we've seen Marketplace in the town centre open a new public play area, and I'm continuing to have conversations with the Borough Council about a much more ambitious regeneration programme for White Lion Square, which is at the heart of the town centre. And it's a conversation that can't just be between politicians. As soon as I can, I'll be sharing more information with Hatfield residents and asking for their input, imagination and ideas. Madam Deputy Speaker, our next generation of new towns should take inspiration from the last, but they must learn lessons as well. And many honourable members have talked to these in depth today. And I want to commend particularly the member for Redditch, who I thought made a very excellent and insightful speech. But we're looking to design places that we want to see thriving in the 2040s. And of course, that is a very different challenge to building in the late 1940s. That said, I believe there are examples of best practice and some timeless principles to look to again. I want to congratulate Sir Michael Lyons and his team on the New Towns Commission. They delivered a serious piece of work at pace and were clear that there has to be a long-term vision for each new place that we build, but there can be common elements to all. And my friend, the chair of the Select Committee, talked to some of these earlier, but I think it's worth returning to a few of them again. Number one, higher density in centres, so that residents can walk to local amenities and that the footfall created means that there is demand to support a viable and vibrant high street. Dedicated space for businesses and commercial activity so that new communities sustain jobs and attract ongoing investment. Easy access to parks, green spaces and nature. Social infrastructure, the good schools, cultural and sporting facilities, healthcare and hospitals in place from the outset, and balanced communities with a range of housing tenures. And it's the need for social and affordable housing that has always been important to me and integral to the New Towns project. Outside of our largest cities, our existing new towns have the highest concentration of social homes in the country. We need to build social homes at scale again to meet the urgency of the housing crisis, but to plan with consideration as well. In our existing towns, there is too often a visible divide between estates and roads full of private homes for the more affluent. In our next generation of new towns, let's build tenure-blind communities. Our ambition should be to walk down a street and not be able to tell the difference between a private home, one for private rent, one for shared ownership, or one for social rent. And as we walk down these streets of tomorrow, let's make sure that they're lined with electric car charging points, homes with solar panels and heat pumps, and are never too far away from a green space community centre and, in my case, a cricket club. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was born in Welwyn Garden City, and it's my privilege to represent two brilliant and unique places and new towns in Parliament. So I will always be a champion for them. But if we are to meet the moment and address the housing crisis, we need advocates for the next generation of these communities on all sides of this chamber. Let's invest in renewing the new towns that have been with us since the 1940s. Let's be bold in planning the communities of the future, and let's get building.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, particularly her moving comments about community. And while obviously community starts with the people, it does need a bit of a boost from the planners and the developers from time to time. Now, seeing is believing when it comes to delivering the homes this country urgently needs. And I've seen and been inspired by things in Rugby. And just as we've heard from honourable members how old new towns inform the new towns, so can the urban extensions to old towns, like mine of Rugby, provide some guidance and inspiration. I want to put on record my belief that we have a fantastic housing minister who is totally committed, as is the government, to delivering on the 1.5 million houses commitment. It's vital, and it will avoid a return to an era when successive governments failed to build enough homes for our growing population. Now, whether old or new town, what our constituents want are first-class links to essential facilities, GP surgeries, schools, green spaces, libraries and transport. In October 2024, Madam Deputy Speaker, I spoke about what I called the moon landing paradox, how human beings can land a man on the moon, create artificial intelligence, nuclear power stations and the rest. But we seem incapable of providing sufficient homes of sufficient quality at an affordable price to sufficient numbers of our citizens. Now, a regular refrain in my inbox is concern over rugby's expansion as a conurbation. One that I appreciate stems from the fear that infrastructure and services haven't kept pace with development. As an MP, I, like all my colleagues, meet with developers to ensure that the appropriate Section 106 funding is used to alleviate these problems. But in Rugby, as an urban extension, we have a place called Holton, where Urban and Civic are the master developer. And in my view, it's a model of some success that deserves close attention because of some of the key ways they've sought to overcome the stumbling blocks that often lead to public scepticism or opposition to new housing developments, and that's clearly vital as the government proceeds with its plans. Key to Holton's success was the early investment in amenities, working with local and national stakeholders, providing confidence, reassurance and demonstrating the tangible benefits of large-scale developments. For example, the early delivery of a 5-kilometre link road to Rugby immediately mitigated the concerns of residents over congestion that would have occurred. It enabled the accelerated development of the St Gabriel's Primary School ahead of the first residents even moving in. And they also accelerated the development of Holton School, and I recently visited the extension to that school of a primary school. They accelerated it by 7 years. Just taking the link road, imagine if it had been delivered when the planning obligation required it, which is in 2026. My inbox will have been filled to the brim, quite rightly, with complaints about lorries, road traffic and road safety and so on. Developers thought carefully about the amenities to put in place: a supermarket, cafes, restaurants, the Dolman Farm Community Hub, great pedestrian routes and more. A Parkway train station, Madam Deputy Speaker, will also arrive, but of course, like trains these days, it may take some time. But it is coming, I'm assured. To replicate such developments and achieve the goals of this government, we must be clear-eyed in our focus, maintain our vision and invest significantly, something I know that the government's doing with its £39 billion affordable homes plan, a priority of my constituents. What's clearly needed now is a resolute focus by the government, which I believe it has, on working in partnership with developers and investors and making sure that the master developers or corporations have the resources and backing to deliver on the promises that they make to our communities. Housing and planning are a terrain littered with broken promises and unintended consequences. We've constructed an edifice of often well-intentioned constraints on government, which exists on the surface to protect the environment or archaeological sites, local political opinion, wildlife and so on, but which in reality makes it harder for developments to be brought forward quickly. Now, while I didn't coin the phrase, I was the first MP to say in this House last January that we should build, baby, build. And I stand by this statement. I commend the government for moving quickly and boldly in reforming our planning system and having an ambitious home building target and insisting, often against the will of some house builders, on affordability and the provision of social housing. But what I would like to see, Madam Deputy Speaker, is even more of an action this day approach, which I'm confident that these benches will support, so that we would use every power available to us as a government to overcome any and all impediments to the delivery of these new towns across the country and to get them started pronto. For example, we could stipulate some ideas that I would like to suggest to the Minister. For example, we could stipulate 5 areas across the country where there are large populations of young people, and we could pass legislation perhaps to allow modular housing developments, and we could ensure their high quality by running a competition globally and nationally for the best architects and engineers in the world to design small modular homes with up to 2 bedrooms for substantially less than the cheapest site-built home. I spoke about the moon landing paradox, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, this could be something of a moonshot, an effort to show the country and those of lower incomes or people starting their careers or their families, that we have their backs. We could further use the prisoners' building homes model to innovate, to reduce costs, and simultaneously to reduce reoffending. I'd be very grateful if the Minister would comment on these moonshot-type suggestions that I have put forward today to the House. Bold action is needed, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's essential if we are to truly make a difference for our communities, and that is exactly what we are seeing from this government. More power to their elbow.
Sam Rushworth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and often last but hopefully not least in my contribution. And may I also thank my honourable friend, the member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, for what I thought was an excellent opening speech, but also other colleagues, particularly those from new towns who've spoken today. I represent a town that was founded in the 7th century, and I'm really proud of our history and heritage, but something that's really struck me today, as many of my colleagues have spoken, is the importance also of neighbourhood and community in what makes a great town. This government's plan to build 12 new towns is a positive change from the short-termism, lack of ambition and decline that we've experienced over the past decade and a half. I think for too long, Britain's lack of affordable housing has been put in the too difficult box, where challenges get tinkered with, but the big decisions... where challenges get tinkered with, but the big, difficult decisions get perpetually delayed, and where politicians do what is easy for now rather than what's right for the future. So I welcome this government's decision to restore the dream of home ownership for the rising generation. New towns, new transport infrastructure in the north announced yesterday, and new homegrown clean energy that will over time mean that energy bills make up a smaller share of a household's income, a new Britain. And Madam Deputy Speaker, though we will get new homes, there will not be a new town in County Durham. Other areas need them more. But we will, I think, the whole country benefit from them. Not just from the economic growth, but their potential to modernise our country. And when these towns are built, as others have said, I hope that they are truly 21st century towns for a new era. Beautiful, green, and harnessing the best of British ingenuity. It's moved by the member for Vauxhall and Camberwell, who spoke, I thought, really eloquently about what those towns should look like. And I've come here today with one simple ask: that every new town be sustainably built with a modern district heating network. This is not radical, it's not a new or untested approach to providing cheaper and lower carbon power. The government announced last year 6 areas that will be put on heating networks that are not, but I've not heard it mentioned in conjunction with the new towns. Now, in Denmark, 70% of houses are already connected to district heating networks, and 75% of those are already using fully renewable green energy sources, and they've got a goal of increasing that to 100% by 2030. The average Danish home on a district heat network has an average energy bill of £835 a year. That's around £1,000 a year less than the average home in the UK. Yeah. In Germany, about 15% of homes are on district heating networks, but in cities like Munich, Hamburg and Berlin, this is closer to 1/3, and they've got an ambitious goal to bring this up to 1/2. The very fact that being heat networked is more energy efficient, but the energy efficiency grows when the most sustainable energy sources are used for the network. I want to encourage the government to look seriously at the opportunities presented by geothermal energy, so we do not risk getting left behind. Germany's got a goal to increase their geothermal energy tenfold by 2030. This can mean deep geothermal, where deep wells bring water to the surface at a very high temperature, such as the Eden project, or United Downs in Cornwall, or Stoke-on-Trent's heating system, or in Southampton, where a city heating network draws from deep geothermal wells, a project that I believe was set up by the Minister for Energy Security when he led Southampton Council. It could also be shallow geothermal, with water passed through a heat exchanger, including those using mine water, such as in Gateshead or Lanchester Wines in Durham. Geothermal can be done anywhere, but 3 of the new towns lend themselves particularly well to this because of their geology. Those are Manchester Victoria, Leeds South Bank and Adlington, though having listened to the contribution of my honourable friend, the member for Macclesfield, I can suggest other alternatives where the geography is even more advantageous. So the use of geothermal and heating networks would be also beneficial to the UK's just transition from oil and gas, since we have skilled workers in drilling and pipelines. And the National Geothermal Centre and Durham Energy Institute are world-leading in this area and on hand to work with the government to develop the right solutions. Imagine moving into your new home in a new town, knowing that you have 100 years of free heating flowing through your pipes from under the ground. So I would ask gently that the government seriously considers looking at the way that these new towns and their infrastructure draw their energy, because I believe that in doing so, it will benefit the efforts that we're making in other parts of the country, including in Durham, to be part of this national story of renewal.
Come to the front benches, and I come to Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to express my gratitude to the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch for a really engaging speech about how it's the people who invest their lives in the community that make it what it is. And I'm sure we all share in that sentiment. And I've learned a great deal more about new towns from all the honourable members across the House. It's been a privilege to listen to this debate. Our manifesto, the Liberal Democrats, committed to 10 new garden cities. So we're welcoming of this debate, and we're welcoming of the government's ambitions for new towns, depending on how they are done, of course. It's vital to have a new generation of major communities, given the terrible state of affordability in which the housing sector got to under the last Conservative government. And that's why we have an ambition, a big ambition of 150,000 social homes per year above the government's current targets. But new towns mustn't be at the expense, of course, of existing communities and towns. My honourable friends on these benches are engaging constructively with a range of new towns on their boundaries with the government and with local communities in a positive and constructive spirit. They must deliver, of course, in social terms to the homes provided, but also environmentally and economically, as the Mark 1, 2 and 3 new towns actually did so successfully. So there are 3 critical principles that need to be met, Madam Deputy Speaker, in our view. Environmental ambition, successful in social terms, that means infrastructure, and thirdly, long-term financial investment, sufficient to ensure housing is genuinely affordable and will offer a decent home in a good environment in all senses of that word, as honourable members have expressed it in many different ways throughout the debate. So firstly, on environmental ambition. Garden cities, I regret to say, seem to be being, and I hope unintentionally, airbrushed out of this programme in ways that are out of keeping with the post-war New Towns programme. What was built as Town Garden in Stevenage, originally called Town Garden, was a great reflection of how the Garden City principle informed and provided the basis for the New Towns. It was the Garden Cities Association which campaigned for a New Towns programme before the war, and now is the Town and Country Planning Association, and I should probably declare an interest as an honorary voluntary vice president. Garden cities, garden cities are not just words. They are the basis of the new towns, Letchworth and Welwyn, as we've heard well, and many others. Let the countryside invade the town, was one of Ebenezer Howard's cries. And I often wonder if he wrote those words at this very desk here, because his day job was a parliamentary clerk. And in his spare time, he wrote a radical piece called Tomorrow, A Peaceful Path to Real Reform. It didn't sell very well, so he renamed it a year later, Garden Cities of Tomorrow, and that laid the foundation for the garden cities and the new towns that were to come throughout the country. He was surely right to espouse a vision of how people and nature can thrive together, how town and country need to come together, how society and the environment need to thrive together. He was right then, and surely that is right now. So these new towns need to and must set the highest standards of nature protection, of well-insulated homes that are cheap to run, with solar panels on the roof, as promoted by my honourable friend for Cheltenham Sunshine Bill. Yes, with district heating and cheap heat, as the honourable member for Bishop Auckland pointed out. Good for the planet, as is good public transport, which doesn't pollute and jam up the roads. These are the ideas that were pioneered by many of the garden cities in the first place. And some of the best techniques were established, as the honourable member for Letchworth has well explained, the Letchworth Heritage Foundation, in which the environment was effectively endowed with assets and resources so that it would continue to be protected into the future, which means that for over 100 years the Trust has been able to fund and care for the environment and, as the honourable member said, put money back into Letchworth as a community. And that provided the great model and the example and another reflection of garden cities into new towns, the Milton Keynes Parks Trust, which does exactly the same thing, where such estates have not been sold off, as has been described in other new towns. That is an incredibly successful model. It's vital to endow the public realm and the environment with the resources and the investments going to be needed to sustain them, as members have said, for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 and 100 years. So on social impacts and infrastructure, I'd like to ask the Minister, and we'd like to ask the Minister, how councils and communities are going to make decisions over the impacts of the new towns. Any spatial development strategy is going to come after the event. They've already been designated. Parish councils like Somerton in Oxfordshire, which my honourable friend for Bicester and Woodstock is working hard to advocate for, pointed out a range of simultaneous proposals in Oxfordshire, including the Oxford Strategic Rail Freight Interchange, 280,000 square metres of warehousing at Baynard's Green, coincidentally being considered today by Chelwood District Council, the Puy de Fou Leisure Park and many other developments, which together will generate 47 million additional trips per year. The ongoing strategic environmental assessment, which of course I welcome, which the government is engaged in at the moment, may assess some of these impacts, but there is no plan that local authorities will be able to take part in to resolve these decisions and to take decisions about how the new towns, such as Hayford Park in Oxfordshire, will land in their midst and how that will affect the existing network and hierarchy of towns and communities. So there's a strategic planning missing link, and it needs to be put back that would allow the community-led approach to these developments that we would like to see. And allow affected local authorities to have their say. After all, Milton Keynes was a negotiated location for a new town between central and local government, as another example. And as the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch also said, it's vital to respect the identities of the place in which these new towns are located. So can I ask the Minister if he will commission a rapid sub-regional plan process for the councils in each of these locations so that they can resolve these issues? And will he's already indicated he may, but will he visit in due course all of these locations so he can engage with the local communities concerned? And will he confirm, and I think he said he was thinking about it, that as members have raised around the chamber, that the planned housing numbers will indeed count towards local plan targets imposed by the government standard method, because it's going to be impossible for local leaders and local councils to develop these new towns at the same time as trying to deliver impossible housing numbers targets, which many of them are facing. A 41% increase in plan numbers in my Somerset council area alone, for example. And on social impacts within towns, the pre-war garden cities and post-war new towns were 90% affordable social housing. So, and I know in the Select Committee the Minister indicated perhaps the government's walking back from the 40% affordable housing target new towns. So what is the minimum the government will accept? Can the Minister tell us? And on infrastructure which is needed, of course, by new and by existing towns, particularly those affected. For example, Ardley Station is needed to serve the Hayford Park new town and the existing community. But there's other forms of infrastructure as well that too often go missing. And it's not just in new towns. Urban extensions such as Orchard Grove in my Taunton and Wellington constituency and the extensions at Bicester in my honourable friend for Bicester's constituency. GP surgeries that were promised and were needed have never come forward. So will the Minister ensure, will the government ensure that existing communities won't lose out GP surgeries as a result of new towns being given those facilities, for example? These are the vital relationships between the existing communities that need to be resolved. Transport, water, energy, health, active travel, that infrastructure must come first and before the housing. And thirdly, on the financial support that these developments will need if they're going to be successful. And of course, all these things, Madam Deputy Speaker, cost money. I recognise that. We recognise that. So we're disappointed that I think the Minister said to the Select Committee there is no new town pot for funding. And that poses a real risk that the £3.9 billion affordable housing programme per year funding will be used to fund this programme, which would inevitably take funding away from other areas. So while the land value capture model that government is promoting is welcome, and we support that, and I want to put that on the record, it's not going to be enough. The original post-war new towns, as many members opposite will know, had significant 60-year Treasury loans, about £4.7 billion worth. Now, depending on when you base that, if you take the 1960s, that would be, if you base it in the 1960s, that's about £140 billion today. Those loans were repaid. They were repaid not just in full, they're repaid with a surplus coming back to the Treasury, both in 1999 when the bulk of it was entirely repaid. Since then, almost another £1 billion was repaid from further receipts and land sales and receipts on that investment. So it's a sound investment. No doubt the Treasury will be saying somewhere that, don't worry, the market can deal with this, we don't need any public money into it. But markets don't look 50, 60, 100 years ahead. Markets don't know how to build communities with community facilities for real people, the kind of people the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch pointed out. So there needs to be long-term financial investment from the government so that these will be successful. Without that long-term investment, we risk repeating some of the failures of the past. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, we stand ready to work with this government and in a constructive way on their New Towns programme, but only if it gives the financial investment that's needed so that it's a success and crucially so that existing towns don't lose out. If it recognises it must commit that long-term investment over and above land value capture so that local councillors and mayors are not left out in the cold trying to promote these projects with one arm tied behind their back. And finally, if it recognises that in a society under threat from climate change, environmental ambition needs to be at the forefront, learning from the very best of the Garden City ideals. Thank you.
I call the Shadow Minister, Gareth Bacon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. At the outset, I'm grateful to the Backbench Business Committee for allocating time for this important debate and to the Honourable Lady, the Member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, for bringing it forward. I do apologise. I've been rehearsing that in my head for quite some time and I've made a mess of it right from the outset. I apologise to the Honourable Lady. I would also like to thank the 16 Honourable Members who have so far spoken in this debate. Madam Deputy Speaker, it seems that every time I return to this place, the government have fallen further and further away from justifying their increasingly mistaken belief that they can deliver on their 1.5 million homes target. No one believes they're going to reach such a lofty, albeit much needed, figure. We've pointed out before that the government's efforts to reach this unrealistic target appear geared towards removing as much local input to decision-making as possible and to shifting development away from brownfield sites in cities and urban areas where demand and infrastructure exists to rural areas where demand is often lower and infrastructure is far less well provided or even non-existent. Which brings us to their new towns policy, a policy about which, as it's currently framed, we have significant concerns, which I will touch upon shortly. At the Labour Party conference at the end of September last year, the Secretary of State pledged that the government will go ahead with working on new towns in at least 12 locations. Since then, it has emerged that only 3 of these new towns will begin before the end of this Parliament, with the rest after 2029. Looking at the 3 new towns that we are supposedly meant to see begun before 2029, we've been told that sites in Thamesmead in Bedfordshire, Leeds, South Bank and Cruise Hill and Chase Park in the London Borough of Enfield will be the first. While His Majesty's opposition recognise the need to build new homes, we hope that the government works harder to listen to and address the concerns of local people in these 3 sites than they have with the Honourable Member for Macclesfield, whose constituency includes one of the other 9 lower priority new town sites. The Honourable Gentleman highlighted some of His Majesty's opposition's key concerns for us when he presented a petition to the House on the 17th of December last year about plans for the Adlington new town. He did so again in his excellent speech earlier today. The concerns he outlined included the adverse impact on the Greenbelt, the adverse impact on agricultural land, strains on local infrastructure and services, and the adverse impact on local communities. We're sympathetic to his concerns, and they're not restricted just to Adlington. One of the first new towns earmarked for building is in the London Borough of Enfield, a borough with 37.3% Greenbelt and 47.6% open space. According to the CPRE, the green space of Enfield, much of which is based on the borders of the Enfield Chase Heritage Area of Special Character, gives large parts of Enfield a rural character comparable to Richmond Park or Hampstead Heath, areas also of significant local and historical value. The site of the proposed new town currently comprises commercial horticultural nurseries, garden centres, a golf course, working farms and greenfield land. The local businesses employ around 1,000 people, and all of this is threatened by this proposal. These are not vast swathes of undeveloped potential, but important green spaces that help as much as urban centres to define an area's character and community. Thamesmead in Bedfordshire is much the same and has been chosen as an area for a whole new standalone town. My honourable friend, the member for North Bedfordshire, highlighted on behalf of his constituents some of his concerns as the local Member of Parliament. It is vital that the government works to fully and properly consult a local community like Thamesmead, an area currently made up of small villages, rather than continue their top-down crusade against the countryside. And this is why, on this side of the House, we have repeatedly sought assurances from the government about their plans for full and proper consultation of local people and local communities. So I hope that the Minister will commit to this today. And of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, the impact of new towns do not stop at the boundaries of the local authority area in which they are developed. My honourable friend, the member for Broxbourne, has highlighted the proposed Cruise Hill development in the London Borough of Enfield will be closer to the village of Goffs Oak in his constituency than it is to Enfield Town Hall. The imposition of a new town of 21,000 properties on the border of his constituency cannot avoid having a direct impact upon his constituents. Will the Minister therefore commit to proper consultation of communities and councils adjacent to the local authority in which the proposed new town may take place? He is a decent man, and I hope that he will. He's more than all right. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do apologise again. The opposition recognises that the country is in desperate need of not just more housing, but more housing in the right places with the right infrastructure to support it. The Honourable Lady, the member for Erith and Thamesmead, made precisely this point in her speech. Identifying where places have the right infrastructure, brownfield or urban capacity, and where new homes are most wanted is a key factor in this. The government must get serious about their failure to improve house building in this country during their first 18 months in power. They must stop making excuses and blaming everybody else, and instead look at how to get the country building in the right places. And that is why the opposition has called for a brownfield first approach to be properly actioned and not just paid lip service to, as it is by the benches opposite. According to the CPRE, in a large number of local authorities, there is enough brownfield land with planning permission to meet the target set by the government's standard method for calculating housing need for at least the next 5 years. The same report shows that England's brownfield sites are increasing in number, land area and minimum net dwellings by up to 54%, 6% and 34% respectively between 2018 and 2024. Now, the government will no doubt point to their brownfield passports policy in response to that criticism. It should be noted that this policy, if actioned, is not without risk. It could result in the bypassing of crucial local input, minimising local community power in their own local neighbourhoods, and rushing through developments despite legitimate local objections, and that will do nothing for people's faith in democracy. But even if that proves to be a misplaced concern, brownfield passports do not deal with some of the deep-seated causes of brownfield delays. After all, we know that there are already hundreds of thousands of planning permissions on sites that have not yet been built, and it is a lazy generalisation and an inadequate explanation simply to blame all of that on greedy land developers, land banking, because the causes are more complex than that. Funding, complexity, increasing regulatory burdens and delays and other factors all play their part. And if the government do nothing to address these factors, then all they will succeed in is achieving more undeveloped planning permissions. And as we all know, people need real buildings to live in, not unexecuted planning permissions. I'll give way to my friend.
I'm very grateful for my friend giving way and for making this point about brownfield sites and the priority for brownfield sites. And I think he's giving the Minister some very good advice. So in Thamesmead, villages where so much more housing is going to come upon them potentially, the first question they'll say will be, well, why haven't you built in those areas which are already developed? Have you maximised the potential in those areas? It is to the government's benefit if they can demonstrate, as I'm sure the Minister will from the dispatch book shortly, that they are going to push as hard as they can on existing urban areas to maximise the housing potential and avoid some of the artificial blockages my honourable friend is talking about.
I agree with my honourable friend. I think it would be a great tragedy if the government push on with their new towns policy, if they simply think that their brownfield passport thing will solve everything else, and we end up with fewer developments on brownfield sites, some developments on greenfield sites, end up losing that precious greenbelt and still not deliver the amount of housing that we need. And that would be an own goal from the government. So I do hope that they will take this away and do something about it. The government need to look further and faster into proper development of brownfield land rather than ripping up the greenbelt and steamrolling over local democracy, local voices and local communities. And recent history shows that this approach works. If the government want to see urban regeneration or densification done right, then they can follow Conservative examples and pursue brownfield, not greenfield first, as my right honourable friend, the Shadow Secretary of State, highlighted at the Conservative Party conference. The government need look no further than the Olympic Park in East London, a brownfield site transformed into a superbly connected hub of housing, business, retail and leisure, completed under Boris Johnson as Conservative Mayor of London. It was the same with Canary Wharf under Margaret Thatcher and Michael Heseltine, when the old dilapidated docks were completely regenerated, revitalised and reborn. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, as we mentioned in the final stages of the Planning and Infrastructure Act's journey through this place, the government should add to their growing pile of U-turns and reverse the damaging blows the Chancellor and the former Deputy Prime Minister dealt to the housing market and the construction market through their unholy trinity of economic decline, tax hikes and cuts to demand-side housing policies. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, only through a genuine brownfield first approach and a reversal of the damage inflicted by Number 11 and the former Secretary of State will the government succeed in protecting our countryside and get to building real homes properly connected with the right facilities that people actually want.
Minister Pennycook.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a pleasure to close this debate for the government. Can I begin by congratulating and thanking my honourable friend, the member for Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, on securing it, and the Backbench Business Committee for granting the House an opportunity to debate this incredibly important matter. I was particularly struck in what was an incredibly strong opening speech by my honourable friend, by her emphasis on people, and as she said, planning done properly being able to change lives. I think that's a hugely important statement and a principle that guides the government in all areas. Can I also thank other honourable members for contributing to the debate? We had a series of thoughtful, passionate and incredibly personal, in many cases, contributions, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the most references to concrete animals that I think of any debate in my nearly 11 years in this place. But it has been a thoughtful and important debate, and rich with history as well. The post-war New Towns programme was the most ambitious town-building effort ever undertaken in the UK. It did transform the lives of millions of working people by giving them affordable and well-designed homes in well-planned and beautiful surroundings. And the 32 communities it created are now home to millions of people, including a number of honourable members who've made contributions this afternoon. I want to stress that the government will continue to invest in the regeneration of our existing new towns. My honourable friend made reference to some of the investment being made currently in hers. My honourable friends for Telford, Rugby, Welwyn, Hatfield and Stevenage all made the case for what is happening, but what they want to see happen in the years ahead to further revitalise the places they represent. But alongside those efforts, we are determined to bring forward the next generation of new towns as per our manifesto commitment. In so doing, we've taken inspiration from the proud legacy of the 1945 Labour government, who through the 1946 New Towns Act initiated the first post-war wave of new town building, as well as the subsequent waves in the 1960s. But we've also sought to learn crucial lessons from those previous efforts. For example, and this was a point that several honourable members made, the fact that previous new town initiatives did not always embed long-term stewardship into their development and the detrimental consequences that has had for those locations. As the House will know, to progress the next generation of new towns, the government established an independent new towns task force within months of taking office. That task force, chaired by Sir Michael Lyons with Dame Kate Barker as his deputy, and 8 other highly regarded expert members drawn from across the built environment sector, and I pay huge tribute to all the work they did in producing their final report. That task force was given a clear mandate to make recommendations to ministers on the location and delivery of new towns with the objective of supporting and unlocking economic growth, as well as making a significant contribution to meeting housing demand in England. The government made clear that the task force should consider not only large-scale standalone new communities of the type Thamesmead might be, but also urban extensions and urban regeneration schemes that would work with the grain of development in any given area. We specified that each of the new settlements should contain at least 10,000 homes, but made clear we expected the number to be far larger in size. We also commissioned the task force with ensuring that any proposals would deliver well-connected, well-designed, sustainable and attractive places where people want to live, with the infrastructure, amenities and services necessary to sustain thriving communities. And let me be clear, and honourable members are right to have raised this, success on those criteria will be integral to the success of a programme as a whole. Last September, the government published the final report of the task force, as well as its initial response to that report and immediate next steps. In that initial response, Madam Deputy Speaker, the government warmly welcomed all 12 of the locations recommended by the task force, on the basis that prima facie each has the clear potential to deliver on the government's objectives. We also made clear that Thamesmead, Cruise Hill in Enfield and Leeds South Bank look particularly promising to us as sites that might make significant contributions to unlocking economic growth and accelerating housing delivery. Madam Deputy Speaker, we're determined to get spades in the ground on at least three new towns in this Parliament, and I stress at least 3, because 3 is not the limit of our ambition. The Shadow Minister, I think, incorrectly assume that it is just 3 and that it's just those 3 locations we've cited as promising. We are determined to deliver at least 3, but we're prepared to progress work on a far larger range of locations if that proves possible. We're now, as I'm sure you're aware, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the process of conducting a strategic environmental assessment to better understand the environmental impacts of new towns developments in respect of the locations recommended by the task force, as well as refining the scope of the programme more generally. And again, I want to stress, no final decisions on locations will be made until that SEA concludes, and prioritised locations could change as a result of that process. We intend to consult on the programme, to directly respond to the Shadow Minister's point, alongside the completed SEA report in the coming weeks. The feedback to that consultation will inform final decisions on the locations we intend to adopt, as well as other matters such as how we allocate funding between sites and how we define and support new town locations in planning policy. At the point we make decisions, we'll publish a comprehensive response to the task force's final report. Madam Deputy Speaker, honourable members have raised a number of specific points in the debate today, which I will respond to as fully as I can within the constraints of the ongoing SEA and programme scoping process. The honourable gentleman, the member for North Bedfordshire, raised the matter, as did the Liberal Democrat spokesman, of LHN, of how housing targets interact with our new towns programme. We have been clear, not least because we expect construction of the new towns that come forward as a result of the programme to only begin in earnest towards the end of the Parliament, that our starting assumption was that new towns should deliver over and above the targets produced by the standard method. But I have been reflecting on this matter, not least in response to representations made from honourable members. And I want to ensure that when we come forward with our final position on LHN, it is one that's fair and consistent across the country and does provide the necessary incentives for communities to want to see new towns come forward. The Chair of the Select Committee and other honourable members raised the issue of affordable housing. Can I assure the House, we're not walking back from our commitments on affordable housing, we're not watering them down. We've been very clear. New towns should have a range of housing types available, including adequate proportions of genuinely affordable homes. It's worth stressing, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the task force, in its final report, endorsed the government's commitment. It was a government gold standard to aim for that 40% affordable housing target. These task force have been very clear in their final report that they endorse that. They want to see that 40% come forward as a minimum. Half of those being social rented homes, and we desperately need social rented homes, and that is why it's such a priority for the government. But what they very clearly said was where viability makes achieving that 40% target challenging, that the government should look to meet the requirement through grant funding. And that is something the government does have to consider as it scopes the programme, particularly in those locations with low land values where meeting that affordable number will be more challenging. But again, we'll bring forward further detail on those and the other placemaking principles in the task force's final report after the environmental assessment and consultation, when we can provide honourable members and the public more widely with more detail. My honourable friend referenced delivery models. The government does agree with the task force that our preference for new towns should be the development corporation model. I think the House well understands the benefits that come with that model. There are, of course, a range of development corporation types, from centrally led corporations, mayoral ones, or even locally led ones. It all depends on the location of the town, its devolution, settlement, and the capacity and capability of the authorities delivering. Again, we're assessing which delivery vehicle options are most appropriate to individual locations, and we'll come forward with further information on that point in due course. Several honourable members raised the issue of funding, challenged me to make clear why there has not been more detail on funding, why there isn't a dedicated pot of funding for new towns. That is because the funding required for new towns, Madam Deputy Speaker, in this spending review period will vary according to the needs of the places which the task force have recommended and which we ultimately adopt through the scoping process. But I want to make clear to honourable members that the delivery of new towns will be backed by funding across the government's landmark housing programmes, such as the £39 billion social and affordable housing programme, but also the hundreds of millions of pounds of grant that are available from our National Housing Delivery Fund for land and infrastructure investment, and the additional capital funding that will be managed by the new National Housing Bank, which will invest in house building across the country. So there are funding sources to draw upon, even though there isn't a specific New Towns Fund that was announced in the budget. I'm happy to give way to the honourable gentleman.
The Minister, who's always very generous with giving way. Could I just press him a little further? Has the Treasury ruled out long-term loans as per the New Towns programme post-war?
Well, I'll come on to talk about financing in slightly more detail, and in particular the options we're considering. But again, I'm afraid he'll have to wait for the publication of the SEA report and the programme that will go out to consultation, and he and others, members across the House, including their communities and neighbouring communities to the sites that are proposed for adoption, will be able to feed into that process more widely. But there is funding and long-term funding available in this spending review period and going forward, because many of these propositions, Madam Deputy Speaker, will be large-scale new communities that will have to be built out over, in some cases, decades. I want to just finish with touching on 2 or 3 other issues that were raised, but most importantly, public engagement. And this has been a theme that's been raised by a number of honourable members. Now, what we got through what the task force got, and the government was kept on top of it, so Michael Lyons reported to me quite regularly about the work of the task force, as the House would expect, was through the call for evidence, through engagement with local areas, local leaders, there is a huge appetite for new towns to come forward. There are lots of parts of the country which would desperately welcome a new town. But I recognise in other areas, where particularly small villages such as Telford, there's trepidation about what may come, there's questions that residents want answered. And in some cases, and my honourable friend, the member for Macclesfield, has been forthright and honest about this, there's outright hostility and objection to some of the locations that have been proposed. And in his particular case, I can assure him, we've met on this subject, we've had several conversations. I do recognise the strength of feeling that exists in his community, and his residents can be in no doubt about the fact that he has conveyed that strength of feeling very forcefully to me on that particular location. The task force report is clear that existing communities should be a key part of any new town development, and community engagement is one of its core recommended placemaking principles. The government is working closely with local leaders as part of the scoping process of the programme and building our evidence base to understand the impacts of potential new town locations, and will carry out, as I've said, the appropriate assessments and public consultations before any final decisions are made on locations. But I must stress, and we have been entirely candid about this fact from the outset, ultimately we're clear that decisions on new town locations will be made in the national interest. I'll happily give way.
Thank him for being generous with his time and giving way. And for reinforcing the government's strategic direction, which I think most of us agree with in his remarks there. It seems as we've moved on to this next stage, there has been many local council leaders that he's spoken about who are feeling that there is friction and frustration with the communication between their local councils and the government department, with the government department making it feel like they are supposed to be bidding for this money. So can he meet with local council leaders to try and reset that relationship so it can be more constructive as we move forward through this next stage of the process?
Well, my honourable friend made the same points at the Select Committee where I appeared earlier in the week. I've taken them on board. I'm happy to look at what the department can do to ensure that there is a constructive relationship going forward in each instance where the government is seeking to build its evidence base. But I certainly don't recognise that that's the government's intention, if you like, to be going out to local areas and asking them to bid in to the programme. But we do want to work with local communities, local leaders to better understand and assess what is the proposition in each particular case. Two, very quickly, Madam Deputy Speaker, issues that I do want to pick up. Firstly, on financing. All of the lessons suggest, and several honourable members made this point very forcefully, that the long-term increase in the value of land once development is underway in new town sites can be captured and reinvested. And the honourable gentleman, the Lib Dem spokesman, is absolutely correct that the new 3 waves of new towns programmes each repaid the money, the investment that was ploughed into them up front. So we know that. And the task force in particular recommended that we should explore a role of options, including taxation, within the financing model. And we are exploring, I think it was a point made by the Select Committee Chair, we are exploring, for example, TIFs and what role they might play in the New Towns programme. And lastly, I just did want to, because it was an important theme, as I said, that several honourable members raised, address this point of stewardship, which I think is particularly important. We very much welcomed all of the recommendations made by the task force on placemaking, on other issues that will be pertinent in the years ahead as we take the programme forward. But in regards to stewardship in particular, they recommended, rightly in my view, that a long-term stewardship model should be in place from the outset, and that should include clear governance and funding structures to manage and maintain communal assets, so we can learn those lessons of the earlier waves of new towns coming forward and get things right for this new programme. So to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government's New Towns programme, in the Government's view, provides a once-in-a-generation opportunity to fundamentally reshape the delivery of large-scale new communities, and by delivering them boost economic growth and productivity and make a significant contribution to meeting housing need in England over the coming decades. The Government remains resolute in its determined to bring forward the next generation of new towns, and will work tirelessly across government and with delivery partners and local communities to ensure that they are, in the words of the task force, not just places to live, but places to live well and places for people. I'm grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Camberwell and Kirkintilloch, for securing and opening the debate. Again, as I said, to other honourable members for taking part. And I very much look forward, and I know honourable members will take me at my word at this, to further engagement across the House as we advance the programme in the months and years ahead.
Katrina Murray to wind up.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And when I applied to the Backbench Business Committee for this debate, even though the bravado said yes, there were lots of interest, I did have some concerns that it might be a little bit niche. So I have so glad to have seen the debate this afternoon. We've had a debate of the mothers and the grandmothers. I also want to wish Yvonne Bonavia a very happy birthday. And it's been a wonderful opportunity to do what has been described to me as write love letters to our communities. Whether it's our towns, our garden cities, or the villages as they currently are and we currently love. It's also been a debate of real concern, and I hope that the Honourable Member for North Bedfordshire and the Honourable Member for Macclesfield have heard the experiences of both the members for Milton Keynes North and Stevenage. If you haven't, I'll also not enough. I'll introduce you to my mother, someone else whose village was subsumed into the Glenrothes new town, but recognised it was the only way that she was going to be able to stay in her area and raise a family, and raise a family without having to, because the jobs and life was there. Final thanks, a particular thanks to my honourable friends for Harlow and Glenrothes and Mid-Fife for their references to town art. It doesn't matter if it's concrete cows, polar bears, hippos, elephants. In my case, it's the totems. They were a strong part of the development corporations, making sure that they used the ready amount of concrete at their disposal, and town artists to make sure that it is not just there is beauty in the built environment as well. And I would encourage the next generation of development corporations to include town artists as part of their workforce. Thank you all, and thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is as on the order paper. As many as of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. I will allow a couple of moments for the front benches to swap over.